Forgive my work clothes, sir.
I want this.
What if the most important night of your life started with everyone in the room staring at you like you didn't belong? She walked into one of Chicago's most expensive restaurants in a food service uniform that still smelled like the kitchen. Tired eyes, flat shoes, a crease across her cheek from the headset she'd worn for 8 hours straight. Every head turned. Some people whispered. One woman actually laughed. He was sitting alone at a corner table, a billionaire who had everything except the one thing money couldn't manufacture. Neither of them knew that the next 3 hours would change both of their lives forever. Drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. The reservation had been made 6 days ago, on a Tuesday afternoon by Ethan Cole's assistant, a sharp, efficient woman named Priya, who had worked for him for 4 years and knew better than to ask questions when he handed her a slip of paper with a time, a date, and the words "blind date" scrawled in his handwriting. Priya had stared at the note for a long moment. Then she'd made the reservation at 11 Madison. Not the New York one, but Chicago's answer to it. A place called Meridian on the 42nd floor of a glass tower on Michigan Avenue, where the prefix menus started at $380 per person, and the maitre d' had a habit of making people feel slightly inferior simply by the angle at which he tilted his head. It was exactly the kind of place Ethan Cole usually hated. He'd chosen it anyway. He wasn't entirely sure why. That was the thing about Ethan Cole that most people got wrong. From the outside, from the covers of Forbes and the business columns, and the breathless profiles that tech journalists wrote about him every 18 months or so, he looked like a man who was completely certain about everything. A man who had willed a logistics software company called Vantage Systems into existence at 26, scaled it to a 9-figure valuation by 30, and sold a controlling stake at 31 for the kind of number that required a moment of silence when it was read aloud. He looked, in other words, like a man with a plan. What those profiles never mentioned, because he never told anyone, and because the journalists who wrote them were more interested in quarterly earnings than in the way a person felt at 7 o'clock on a rainy Friday evening, was that Ethan Cole had been sitting at restaurant tables alone for a very long time. Not always physically alone. Sometimes there was a woman across from him, someone beautiful and polished and perfectly curated, someone who knew the right wine to order and the right things to say about current events and the right way to laugh at his jokes without laughing too hard. He'd dated a few of them seriously enough that Priya had learned their coffee orders. One of them had lasted 14 months before she told him, very calmly, over breakfast in his kitchen, that she felt like she was dating a building. "You're always structurally sound," she'd said, "but nobody lives inside." He'd thought about that for a long time after she left. He was still thinking about it. Meridian was the kind of restaurant that hummed rather than buzzed. Low lighting, dark wood, the soft sound of a jazz trio tucked into the corner near the bar. Not intrusive, just present, like the restaurant itself was breathing. Ethan arrived at 7:15, 12 minutes before the reservation, because he was constitutionally incapable of being late to anything. The maitre d', the head-tilting one, had led him to the corner table with the kind of practiced deference that cost extra without appearing on any bill. "Will your guest be joining you shortly, Mr. Cole?" "I hope so," Ethan said. The maitre d' had smiled the smile of a man who had seen many guests fail to arrive, and retreated. Ethan sat down, straightened the fork that didn't need straightening, and looked out the window at Michigan Avenue 42 floors below. The rain had started around 6 and hadn't decided whether it wanted to commit to a full storm or just stay miserable and ambiguous. Down on the street, yellow cabs and ride shares crawled through the wet dark, their headlights smeared into long reflections across the asphalt. He ordered water. Then he changed his mind and ordered a bourbon, neat, from a server who materialized and dematerialized with the kind of invisible efficiency that places like this trained for years. He checked his phone. He put his phone face down on the table. He picked it up again. There were 11 unread messages. 2 from Priya, 4 from the Vantage Board chat, 1 from his lawyer about the Singapore thing, and 4 from a number he recognized immediately because he'd been staring at it for the past 2 weeks, with the particular paralysis of a man who is afraid to look stupid. His son's school had given him a printed directory at the start of the year. He'd taken it home, set it on the kitchen counter, and ignored it for 3 months. Then his son, Noah, 8 years old, allergic to strawberries, currently obsessed with a particular brand of building blocks that came in sets of 422 pieces, had come home from school one day and mentioned a woman named Ms. Reyes who worked in the after-school program and had helped him when he'd gotten his jacket zipper stuck and couldn't get it unstuck, and he'd been embarrassed about it. She didn't make a big deal, Noah had said, with the studied casualness of a kid trying not to reveal that something had mattered to him. She just fixed it and kept talking about something else so nobody would notice. Ethan had looked up from the document he was reading and actually registered that sentence. He'd found the number in the directory. He'd sat with it for 2 weeks. Then he'd called it, on a Wednesday, at an hour he'd calculated was probably before dinner but after work, because he didn't want to interrupt anything. And he'd said, somewhat stiffly, that he was Noah's father and he'd wanted to call and say thank you. She'd said it was nothing. He'd said it wasn't nothing to his son. There had been a pause, not an awkward one exactly, more like the kind of pause that happens when someone says something true and the other person needs a moment to decide whether they believe it. "He's a good kid," she'd said. He held the door open for me the next morning and then immediately tripped over the doorstop and acted like it didn't happen. He has that thing where he's trying really hard to be smooth, and it makes him the least smooth person in the room. Ethan had laughed. Actually laughed, not the polite social laugh he deployed at networking events, but the short, surprised kind that happens when something catches you off guard. They'd talked for 22 minutes. He'd noticed afterward that he hadn't checked his phone once during the call. That had been 3 weeks ago. The calls had continued, twice more, each longer than the last, each ending at a point where he was aware that they could keep going and had to make a deliberate choice to stop. The fourth call had ended with him, somewhat awkwardly, suggesting dinner. She'd gone quiet for a moment, a different kind of quiet than the first pause, more weighted, more considering, and then she'd said okay, but she had a weird schedule and she'd try her best. He had not told anyone about this, not Priya, not his brother Marcus, who lived in Atlanta and called every other Sunday, and had a habit of offering unsolicited opinions about Ethan's dating life that ranged from "you need to get out more" to "you need to stop being weird about it." Definitely not his board members, who treated his personal life as either a PR risk or a human interest footnote. He just made the reservation and sat with the anticipation quietly, the way he sat with most things. Now he was 42 floors up in the air, in a restaurant that cost more per meal than a lot of people's monthly grocery budget, waiting for a woman he'd met over a phone call about a stuck zipper. His bourbon arrived. He looked at the door. 7:27, 7:31, 7:38. The restaurant's ambient hum continued around him. At a table to his left, a couple in their 50s ate in comfortable silence, the kind that takes decades to earn. Near the bar, a group of 4 in expensive suits talked with the competitive energy of people who were technically celebrating something but actually comparing themselves to each other. The jazz trio shifted into something slower. Ethan's phone screen lit up. A Chicago number, hers, and a message. "Running late. Still at work. Can't go home first. I'm really sorry. Still coming if you want me to." He read it twice. He typed back, "I'm here. Come." Then he put the phone face down again and flagged down the server. "I'll wait on ordering," he said. "Of course, Mr. Cole." He looked back out at the rain. The thing that Ethan Cole did not say to journalists, did not say to his lawyer or his board or his brother in Atlanta, did not say even to Priya, who had worked for him for 4 years and probably knew more about the texture of his daily life than anyone else. The thing he kept entirely to himself was that the loneliness had gotten structural. It wasn't sharp anymore. It had stopped being the kind of thing that hit him at specific moments and started being the kind of thing that was simply always present, the way a house settles into the ground over years and you stop noticing the tilt until someone new walks in and asks if the floor has always done that. He had Noah. He loved Noah with the kind of love that still surprised him sometimes, the ferocious, specific love of a father who had been handed a tiny person and had figured out, day by day, how to keep that person fed and safe and known. He had been good at it, mostly. He had learned to braid hair, badly, and then adequately. He had learned which brand of strawberry-free gummy vitamins Noah would actually chew without being told. He had learned to sit on the floor for an hour helping build a 422-piece set without letting on that his back was killing him. He had a son who held doors open for teachers and tripped over doorstops and was trying so hard to be cool. But when Noah was at school, or at his grandmother's on weekends, or asleep down the hall at night, when the apartment went quiet and the building traffic faded and the city did its nighttime settling, Ethan sat in rooms that were very tastefully decorated and felt the specific emptiness of a life that was objectively successful and subjectively hollow in ways he couldn't figure out how to fix. He was 32 years old. He was waiting for a woman who worked in an after-school program and couldn't go home to change before dinner. He was, despite everything, a little nervous. The door to Meridian opened at 7:49. He knew it was her before he could have known it was her, which was the kind of thing that happened and then you spent time afterward trying to explain it and couldn't, really. Something in the way the door opened, not with the practiced ease of someone walking into a place like this regularly, but with a kind of decisive push that suggested she'd been standing outside for a moment working up to it. Ava Miller walked in. She was wearing dark pants and a dark service industry top, the kind of uniform that disappeared into the background at restaurants less expensive than this one, but stood out like a flag in Meridian's careful dim light. Her hair was pulled back with the practical ruthlessness of someone who'd had it out of her face for hours. There was a faint crease across her left cheek from something she'd been wearing, an earpiece maybe, and her shoes were flat and sensible and slightly damp at the toe from the rain outside. She was not what the room expected. The room communicated this immediately and without a single word being spoken. The maitre d' stepped forward with a look on his face that Ethan had seen before and had always found contemptible. That particular compression of expression that wasn't quite a frown, but wasn't quite neutral either, a look that said, "I will need to assess you." "Do you have a reservation?" he asked, with the head tilt. Ava's jaw tightened slightly. "I'm meeting someone." "The name?" "Cole." A beat. The maitre d' checked his list with the speed of someone who already knew the answer and was deciding how to feel about it. "Mr. Cole's table, yes." He gestured. "Right this way." She followed him. Ethan watched her cross the restaurant. He watched the couple at the table to his left glance up. He watched one of the suit men near the bar say something to another, and both of them look. He watched a woman at a four-top near the window lean slightly toward the woman beside her and murmur something. He watched all of it, and he felt a low, hot irritation settle somewhere in his chest. Ava reached the table. The maitre d' departed with a small nod. For a moment she just stood there. Not exactly uncertain, not exactly confident, somewhere in between, the way a person stands when they've made a decision they're not sure was right and are waiting to find out. "Hi," she said. "I'm sorry. I know I'm late, and I know I—" She gestured briefly at herself. "I didn't have time to go home. I almost didn't come. I thought maybe I should just call and reschedule, but then I thought that would be worse. So I just came. And I probably should have called instead, looking like this." She stopped. She was looking at him steadily. Brown eyes, direct. The look of someone who'd learned that the only way to handle a situation like this was to look it straight in the face. Ethan stood up. It was automatic, the standing. Something his mother had drilled into him at an age when he hadn't understood why it mattered, and had resented being reminded. He stood up, and he held out his hand, and he said, "I came here to meet you." She looked at his hand, then she shook it. Her grip was firm, a little rough at the palm, in a way that spoke of work, and she let go after exactly the right amount of time. Not too fast, not too long. "Ava Miller," she said. "I know," he said. "Sit down." She sat. He sat. There was a brief silence in which both of them seemed to take stock of the actual fact of each other, that this was happening, that they were here, that the phone calls had led to this table, and now they had to figure out what came next. "So," she said. "So," he said, "this is a fancy restaurant." "I know." "Did you pick it to intimidate me, or do you actually like this kind of place?" Ethan paused. It was an honest question, delivered without aggression, more like genuine curiosity, and it deserved an honest answer. "Honestly, he said. I think I picked it because I didn't know what else to pick, and this was the obvious choice, and I'm starting to realize it was the wrong call. Ava looked around the room, taking in the lighting, the jazz trio, the maitre d' stationed near the entrance with his permanent assessment face. It's a little much, she said. Yeah. The guy at the front looked at me like I'd tracked mud in. I saw that. Does he do that to everyone? Only people he's decided don't belong. She looked at him then. Something shifted in her expression. Not quite a smile, but the suggestion of one, a softening at the corner of her mouth. Does he know you're rich? He does. Is that why you still have a table? Probably part of it. She picked up the menu, the physical menu, leather-bound, heavy, the kind of menu that was a statement, and opened it. She looked at it for a moment. Her expression stayed neutral, but he saw her eyes track down the price column in a way that was quick and practiced, the way someone looks when they've learned to assess cost fast because it matters. The prefix is, she started. You're not paying, he said. I didn't ask you to. I know. I'm telling you, not as a flex, just as a fact. So you can pick whatever sounds good without doing the math. Another pause. She looked at him over the top of the menu. You say that like you figured out what bothers people and you're trying to head it off. I spend a lot of time thinking about logistics. That's your company, right? Logistics software? Was. I sold the controlling stake. What do you do now? Poorly defined investment in board work, he said. And I pick up my kid from school at 3:15 and I'm very serious about not being late for that. Something in her expression changed. A small, genuine shift, the kind that happened when someone said something unexpected. Noah talks about you, she said. He says you know the name of every one of his building block sets. I quiz myself. Why? Because he wants to talk about them, and I want to be able to have the conversation. Ava set the menu down on the table. She looked at him for a long moment. Not the assessing look from when she'd first arrived, but something more considered, more careful, like she was revising something. Okay, she said. What do you want to know about me? Torchad. What Ethan wanted to know about Ava Miller could have filled several conversations, which was how the first 40 minutes went. Filling conversations, the good kind, the kind that moved fast because both people were paying attention and neither of them was performing. She'd grown up in Pilsen, the second of 3 kids, her father on disability since she was 12, and her mother working 2 service jobs that between them added up to one exhausting full-time existence. She'd been the organized one, the kid who figured out the schedule, who made sure her younger sister got on the right bus, who learned to cook because someone had to, and her mother came home too tired. I was 9 when I figured out the EBT card system, she said. She said it matter-of-factly, without any of the performative self-pity that people sometimes brought to difficult childhoods, as though she'd assessed the situation a long time ago and decided it just was what it was. Not because anyone taught me, because it was either figure it out or we were going to have a problem at the register. You figured it out. I figured it out. She picked up her water glass. I've been figuring things out since I was 9. It's basically my whole personality. She'd gotten a partial scholarship to UIC, worked part-time through most of it, graduated with a degree in social work that she'd been very sincere about using, and then ran directly into the reality of what social work paid versus what her student loans required. I did case management for 2 years, she said. Child welfare cases. It was... She stopped. I'm going to say it was the hardest thing I've ever done and leave it there, because if I start explaining it, I'll just get depressed, and this is technically a first date. Technically? We've talked on the phone 4 times. I feel like that should count for something, but I'm not sure what the etiquette is. I don't think there's etiquette. Right, so we're in uncharted territory. She picked up a piece of bread from the basket the server had brought and tore it in half. I left case management, went to the after-school program because the pay was worse, but I don't know. It was less like being constantly at the edge of a disaster I couldn't stop, and more like being actually useful in a small, specific way. Small and specific isn't bad. No, she chewed. It's actually what I'm good at. Big picture stuff, I don't know. But fixing a stuck zipper so a kid doesn't feel embarrassed in front of his class. She shrugged. I can do that. Ethan leaned forward slightly. He talked about it for a week. The zipper? The fact that you didn't make a thing of it. He paused. Noah doesn't talk to me about everything. He's 8, and there's stuff he keeps to himself, which I think is healthy and also drives me insane. But he told me about the zipper. Ava was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Kids know when you see them." "What do you mean?" "When adults actually look at them, like they're a real person, not just a small inconvenience or a cause or a thing to manage. Kids know the difference immediately. Noah knew I saw him. That's what he was telling you when he brought it up." She paused. "He's a good kid. He's got a lot going on inside, you can tell. He's still working out how to let it show." Ethan looked at her. She'd said it simply, without any attempt to impress him with it, the way someone states a thing they've simply noticed. "Yeah," he said. "He is." Their food came. The server, excellent at the invisible efficiency thing, described each component with the practiced enthusiasm of someone who genuinely loved food and had learned to translate that love into restaurant vocabulary. Ava thanked him directly, looked at him when he spoke, asked one real question about the preparation that surprised the server enough that he answered with actual detail rather than the script. "You're good with service people," Ethan observed. "I am a service person. I mean, I know what you mean. I'm not offended." She cut into the thing on her plate. "I've worked in enough restaurants to know that when customers actually look at you and ask real questions, it matters. I don't know. I try to be the customer I would have wanted when I was on the other side." "How many restaurant jobs?" "God, let's see." She counted on her fingers. 4? 5 if you count the summer I did catering, which I try to block out for emotional health reasons. "What happened in catering?" "What didn't happen?" She pointed her fork at him. "Do you know what it's like to carry a tray of shrimp cocktail through a room where everyone is ignoring you like your furniture for 6 hours in rented shoes?" "I don't." "Consider yourself lucky." She ate. "What about you? What did you do before you were—" She gestured vaguely at the restaurant, at him, at the general concept of his life. "Before I was this? Before the magazine covers and the fancy restaurant on the 42nd floor?" He sat back. "My dad worked at a distribution center, long-haul logistics, which is part of why I ended up in that space, I think, though I didn't consciously know it at the time. He was good at it, but the system was inefficient in ways that he'd complain about at dinner, these specific operational frustrations. And I used to sit there and think about solutions." "How old were you?" 14? 15? I'm not going to pretend it was some visionary thing. I was a nerdy kid who was good at systems, and I'd absorbed my dad's frustrations, and I started thinking about them like math problems. And then you built the company, and then I built the company. Took 7 years. The first 2 were very bad." "How bad?" "Credit card debt and instant noodles bad. Living in a 2-bedroom in Wicker Park with 3 other people bad. I coded on a laptop I'd bought secondhand and held together with a rubber band in genuine denial." Ava smiled, a real one this time. Not the corner of the mouth suggestion from before, but an actual smile that changed the whole structure of her face. "What?" he said. "Nothing. You don't lead with this." "With what?" "The instant noodles, the rubber band laptop. Most people in your position—" She stopped, reconsidered. "The impression you get from the outside is that it's all inevitable, like it was always going to happen because you're just that kind of person." "Nobody's that kind of person." "No, they're not." She looked at him thoughtfully. "What changed at year 2? When did it turn?" They talked for another hour. The jazz trio cycled through their set list and started again from somewhere near the beginning. The restaurant shifted around them. Tables turned over, new people arrived and settled. The ambient hum changed pitch slightly. They didn't notice. Ethan told her about the early Vantage years, the first real client, the near-death experience of a partnership that had almost dissolved everything at year 4. He talked about it the way he almost never talked about it. Not the triumphant version, the one for profiles and keynotes, but the actual version, with the specific texture of what it felt like to be 28 years old and watching something you'd built for 6 years come apart, and having to decide whether to fight for it or let it go. You fought for it, she said. Not a question. I'm not capable of letting things go, he said, for better and worse. Is that what happened with Noah's mother? It was a direct question. She asked it without flinching, without coding it in anything, just asked it because it was the next honest thing. Ethan was quiet for a moment. No, he said. That was different. Claire and I, we were together for 3 years. We had Noah. And about 8 months in, she made a decision that she was not, that this wasn't right for her, the specific shape of the life we were building. She wasn't wrong that it wasn't right for her. She was honest about it. He turned his water glass on the tablecloth. She's in Portland now. She sees Noah on agreed-upon holidays. She sends him thoughtful gifts. They have a relationship that is civil and scheduled and works within its parameters. How do you feel about that? I feel like I want more for him than parameters. Ava nodded slowly. She didn't say anything, which was the correct thing. Some responses needed to be received quietly. He's okay, though, Ethan said. Kids are more adaptable than you think. Or maybe that's what people say to reassure themselves. He looked up. What do you think? You work with them? Both, honestly, she said. They are adaptable. And sometimes the adaptability is its own kind of hurt that takes a while to surface. She paused. Noah's okay, but he's also working something out. I can tell. It's in the way he watches adults. But he pays close attention. He's trying to figure out the rules. What rules? The rules of how people stay, she said quietly. The table went still. Somewhere behind Ethan, a woman laughed at something. A genuine burst of it, quickly caught. The jazz trio played on. I didn't expect you to say that, Ethan said. Sorry, too much? No. He shook his head. It was exactly right. It's exactly what he's doing. He looked at her. I didn't expect that. What did you expect? I don't know. Something more careful. People are usually more careful. Ava tilted her head slightly. I've been careful my whole life, she said. I'm tired. 7 years of careful. That was how she put it. Later, when the conversation shifted and deepened the way it did when two people stopped auditioning for each other and started talking. 7 years of being the person who had it together because someone had to. In her family, that person had been her. In her relationships. And she was brief about this, not evasive, just economical. It had been her too, until she'd looked up one day and realized that being indispensable to people who wouldn't be indispensable back was just a slow, respectable way of being alone. The last person I dated, she said, told me I was amazing and that he didn't know what he'd do without me, and then did the thing where you can tell someone is looking for an exit, but they're waiting for you to open the door so they don't have to feel bad about it. Did you open the door? Eventually, she rearranged the things on the table in front of her slightly. A small fidget, the kind that people do when they're telling a true thing and need something to do with their hands. I'm not good at the end of things. I know how to keep going. I don't always know when to stop. Is that a fault? My mother would say it's a feature. She'd say it's how I got anywhere. She looked at him. What do you think? I think, Ethan said carefully, that knowing when to stop is overrated. I think most things worth having required someone who didn't know when to stop. Including Vantage? Including everything. She considered that. Outside, the rain was still going. 42 floors down, the street had gotten quieter. It was nearly 9 o'clock, and the dinner traffic had thinned to scattered umbrellas and late-night stragglers. Can I ask you something? Ava said. Yes. Why this? She gestured again in that way she had, vague but pointed. Why dinner? Why? She seemed to be choosing words. You're obviously not short on options. What is this for you? Ethan looked at her. He could have given a smooth answer. He was capable of smooth answers. He'd given plenty of them, to journalists and investors and women across other restaurant tables. He could have said something charming and oblique that communicated interest without vulnerability. He'd been doing that for years. I'm lonely, he said. Not dramatically, not in a way that's consuming my life, but it's there and it's been there for a while, and I'm tired of treating it like a logistical problem I can optimize my way out of. He paused. And I talked to you on the phone for 22 minutes about a stuck zipper, and I didn't check my phone once, and that hasn't happened in... He thought about it. I don't actually know how long. The table was quiet. Ava looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, I didn't check my phone either. It was at 9:43. Ethan would remember the time because he'd glanced at his watch just moments before, out of the old reflexive habit of tracking the hour. That everything shifted. The woman at the table 3 to their right had been there since before Ethan arrived. She was in her 70s, he thought, sitting with a younger couple, a daughter and son-in-law possibly, or friends. The relationship wasn't clear. She'd been eating steadily, talking moderately, the picture of a pleasant evening out. And then she wasn't. It happened fast and not fast simultaneously, the way emergencies always did. One moment she was there, present, part of the hum. The next she was tilting, not falling exactly, more a kind of wrongness in her posture, a slackening. And the younger woman with her made a sound that cut through the ambient noise like a pin dropped in a library, high and sharp and terrified. Oh my God, Margaret! The restaurant's hum stopped like a switch thrown. Ethan was already turning. Most of the people around them were doing the same, the involuntary swivel of human attention toward crisis, followed immediately by the freeze that sets in when the brain is calculating what to do and coming up with nothing. Several people stood. Nobody moved. The younger woman was gripping the older woman's arm, and the older woman, Margaret, was trying to say something, her hand at her chest, her face wrong in a way that suggested the word pain even without the word being spoken. The son-in-law was up, looking around the restaurant with the expression of a man who needed someone else to tell him what to do. Ava was already moving. She crossed the distance between the tables in 5 steps, and Ethan registered it not as something dramatic but as something efficient. No hesitation, no performance, just direction. She reached Margaret before the server had made it halfway across the restaurant. She crouched down beside her, put one hand on the woman's arm, and said clearly and without panic, Hi, I'm here. I've got you. Can you tell me where you're feeling the discomfort? Her voice was different. Not different from her earlier self. There was still the same directness, the same lack of performance, but it had taken on something additional, a kind of steadying quality, the vocal equivalent of ballast. She was the calmest thing in the room, and she was doing it deliberately. Margaret's eyes found her. Something in them, the wildness that fear put there, shifted slightly. Here, Margaret whispered, moving her hand. Okay, Ava said. That's okay. We're going to get you help. She looked up at the son-in-law. Do you have her medications? Is she on anything for her heart? Yes, she takes... Get the bottles if you have them, right now. Tell me the names. She looked at the server who'd arrived. Call 911. Tell them possible cardiac event, patient is conscious and communicating. We're at... She glanced at Ethan, who had moved close without realizing it. 42nd floor, Meridian, he said. 42nd floor, Meridian. Give them the building address. Go. The server went. The son-in-law was fumbling with a small pill case. Ava took it from him gently, looked at it, nodded to herself. Okay, she said. She turned back to Margaret, who was still watching her with those frightened eyes. Margaret, I need you to stay with me. Eyes on me, okay? Just me. What's your granddaughter's name? A pause. Then Margaret said faintly, Emma? How old is Emma? 3. Does she do that thing where 3-year-olds explain things very seriously, like they invented the concept? Ava asked. A beat of silence. Then, impossibly, Margaret almost smiled. Yes, she said, barely a breath. She tells me about dinosaurs. She sounds like a scientist, Ava said. We're going to get you home to Emma and the dinosaurs, okay? Keep talking to me. Ethan stood slightly behind her and watched. He had been in rooms where people performed competence, conference rooms, boardrooms, crisis calls at 2 a.m, when a software failure had cascaded through 8 different logistics partners, and everyone was talking loudly and with great authority and producing very little. He knew the performance of competence. He'd gotten decent at it himself. This wasn't a performance. This was just a woman who knew what to do, doing it without drama and without self-congratulation because someone needed it done. She kept Margaret talking. She relayed information to the building's emergency responders when they arrived 3 minutes before the paramedics. She moved out of the way when she needed to move out of the way, and back in when she needed to be back. She held the younger woman's hand, Margaret's daughter, it turned out, and said something quiet to her that Ethan couldn't hear, but that stopped the woman from the edge of full panic and brought her back to functional. When the paramedics arrived and took over, Ava answered their questions directly and concisely. Time of onset, observed symptoms, medication names she'd retained from a 30-second look at a pill case. They nodded. One of them said something brief and professional that Ethan read as "You did good." She stepped back. Her hands were shaking, he noticed. Just slightly, the adrenaline working its way out. She stood there for a moment with her back to him, watching the paramedics work, and he saw her take one long breath and then another. Then she turned around. She looked at him, and for a moment the restaurant, the jazz trio that had stopped playing, the other diners who were beginning to murmur and shift, the maitre d' doing his very best to manage the situation, all of it fell into the background. "Sorry," she said. The word came out reflexively. "Don't," he said. Ava." He said her name clearly, and she stopped. "Don't apologize." She looked at him. In the light of the restaurant, with the evening that had gone in directions neither of them had planned, with her hair slightly less neat than it had been, and her sensible shoes still damp at the toe, and her service uniform that the room had judged before she'd said a word, she looked at him, and he looked back, and what he thought was, there it is. Not a revelation exactly, not the kind of moment that movies put swelling music under, just a recognition, clear and simple and not available to doubt, of something real. "Come sit back down," he said. She hesitated. "Please," he said. She came back to the table. "Tsang." Margaret was taken out on a stretcher. The paramedic said something reassuring to the family that translated, in body language, to caught, early, good prognosis. The daughter, the one whose hand Ava had held, stopped at their table on her way out and gripped Ava's arm and said something that made Ava nod and say it was nothing. She was glad she could help. After they'd gone, the restaurant resumed. Not immediately. There was a moment of collective recalibration, a restaurant-wide exhale. But gradually, the ambient hum returned. The jazz trio looked at each other and started playing again, and the evening reconstituted itself around the edges of the space where the emergency had been. Their table was very quiet. "How do you know how to do that?" Ethan asked finally. Ava was looking at her hands, still processing. "The case management years," she said. "I took a lot of CPR and first response training. We had to, in the field. You never know when—" She paused. "You just never know." You kept her calm. I tried to. You talked about dinosaurs. Ava looked up. Something in her expression was unguarded, the way it hadn't quite been before. The evening had stripped something back. "People who are scared need something to hold on to," she said, "something specific and real. If she's thinking about Emma and the dinosaurs, she's not thinking about how scared she is. That's the whole trick." "That's not a trick. That's—" He stopped. "What?" "That's how you raise kids," he said quietly. "When they're scared of something, you find them something specific and real to hold on to." She was very still. "Yeah," she said. "I guess it is." They stayed at the table for another 40 minutes, which was longer than either of them had planned and neither of them mentioned or moved to end. They ate what was left of their dinner slowly, without the earlier self-consciousness, because the evening had moved past the part where self-consciousness was available. She told him about her sister, currently at DePaul on a nursing track that Ava had helped engineer through 2 years of financial aid applications and scholarship essays, and a lot of phone calls that Ava had made on her lunch breaks. "She's going to be incredible," Ava said, with the particular pride of someone who has invested in another person not as an obligation, but as a genuine belief. He told her about Noah's latest building block project, a recreation of some structure from a video game that required pieces from 3 different sets and a level of spatial reasoning that, Ethan had privately decided, suggested a kid who was going to be good at engineering when he grew up, though he hadn't said this to Noah because he didn't want to project. "Do you want more kids?" she asked, and then immediately looked like she was considering whether it was too early to ask that. "I don't know," he said. "It's not something I've let myself think about seriously." He looked at her. "What about you?" "I want one," she said. "Maybe two. I want to do it right, though. I want to be in a position where I'm not struggling so hard that the kid absorbs it." "You mean financially?" "Financially and emotionally, all of it." She was quiet for a moment. "I've watched my mom work herself to the edge her whole life, and she loves us completely, but there's a kind of exhaustion that seeps into everything eventually. I don't want that." "You're not your mother." "No, but I'm also not," she gestured. "I'm not where I want to be yet." "Where do you want to be?" "I don't know exactly. I just want enough breathing room that I can be present. That's the whole goal, just enough space to be present." Ethan looked at her for a long moment. He thought about the word present. He thought about the years he'd spent being in rooms and being elsewhere simultaneously, the way his mind went to the next quarter, the next problem, the next thing that needed optimization, even when Noah was sitting next to him building something. He thought about 22 minutes on a phone call when he hadn't done any of that. "That seems like a reasonable goal," he said. "It sounds small when I say it out loud." "It doesn't," he said. "It sounds like the thing everyone actually wants and nobody admits is what they're after." The check came. Ethan handled it with the minimum of production, which she noticed and didn't comment on. They put on their coats. The maitre d' held the door. With somewhat less head tilting than earlier, Ethan noted with satisfaction. The elevator was quiet, going down. They stood side by side, watching the floor numbers drop. "The guy at the front," Ava said as they passed the 20th floor. "When I came in, did you see his face?" "I saw it. I almost left." "I know. I stood outside for probably 2 minutes talking myself out of leaving." Ethan looked at her reflection in the elevator doors. The dark uniform, the practical shoes, the face of someone who'd been working since before noon and had come here anyway. "I'm glad you didn't," he said. She looked at his reflection too. "Yeah," she said. "Me too." The lobby doors opened onto Michigan Avenue, and the rain had thinned to something that was barely rain anymore, more of a suggestion, a dampness in the air. The street was quieter than it had been at 8 o'clock. The light was orange-amber off the wet pavement. They stood on the sidewalk for a moment, adjusting to the outside. "I have to take the bus," Ava said. "I'll get you a car." "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to." He looked at her. "It's late, and it's been a long night, and you've already saved someone's life. Let me get you a car." A beat. "Okay," she said. He pulled out his phone. While he arranged it, she stood beside him, looking out at the street. A cab splashed through a puddle. Someone across the avenue walked a dog that wanted to stop and smell everything. "I had a good time," she said, which is a weird thing to say given how the middle of it went. "I had a good time too." The restaurant was too much. "The restaurant was too much," he agreed. "Next time." She stopped. "Next time?" he said. She glanced at him sideways. "If there's a next time." "There's a next time." "Okay." She looked back at the street. Somewhere with a less intense maitre d'. Done. The car arrived. A black sedan, 3 minutes. The driver pulling to the curb with quiet efficiency. Ava looked at it. Then she looked at him. She looked, he thought, like a person who had been running for a very long time and had briefly, tonight, been allowed to stop and look around at where they were. "Good night, Ethan," she said. "Good night," he said. She got in the car. He watched it pull away from the curb and join the thin late-night traffic on Michigan Avenue, heading south. He stood on the sidewalk for another minute. The city breathed around him. The rain had stopped. His own car was coming. He'd arranged it while arranging hers, a 2-minute wait. But he stood there in the quiet, hands in his coat pockets, not quite ready to move. He thought about the word present. He thought about a woman who talked to a frightened elderly stranger about her granddaughter's dinosaurs. He thought about Noah, asleep 12 miles north, probably with one arm thrown over the specific building block set he'd been working on, because he liked to have it close. The car came. Ethan got in, leaned back against the seat, and looked at the city going past the window. He hadn't checked his phone once. The car dropped Ava off at her building at 11:23. She knew the exact time because she checked it out of habit, the same habit that had her tracking shifts and bus schedules and the specific window between when the laundromat on her block closed and when the one 4 blocks over opened, the 1,000 small logistics of a life run on a tight margin. 11:23 meant 6 hours and 7 minutes before her alarm. She went upstairs, let herself in, and stood in the middle of her apartment in the dark for a long moment before she turned on the light. The apartment was 380 square feet on the 3rd floor of a building in Bridgeport that had been well maintained in the 80s and had been slowly spending down that inheritance ever since. Her place was clean. She was constitutionally incapable of living in disorder, another childhood survival skill that had become personality. But it was also just small. A kitchen that was technically a kitchen. A window that looked out at the brick wall of the building next door. A radiator that worked enthusiastically from November through March and made a sound like a small percussion instrument doing so. She sat down on the edge of her bed without taking off her coat. She'd saved someone's life tonight, possibly. Or at least she'd held the space open until the people with the equipment arrived. The paramedics had said something reassuring on their way out. She'd heard the words "good catch" and "early intervention" and had nodded and said it was nothing. It was not nothing, and she knew that, but she'd been saying it was nothing for long enough that it came out automatically. She took off her coat. She hung it up. She made herself a cup of instant coffee that she didn't need and stood at the window with it, looking at the brick wall. Her phone had 4 new messages. Her friend Diane, who worked with her at the after-school program and had been in on the blind date secret from the beginning, had sent 3 increasingly unhinged texts over the course of the evening demanding a status report. The 4th message was from her sister Maya, who was in the middle of finals and had somehow still found time to send a voice memo that was 40 seconds of her describing, in chaotic detail, the study group disaster that had apparently unfolded that afternoon. Nothing from Ethan. She told herself she wasn't checking for a message from Ethan. She put her phone face down on the counter. She drank the coffee. She thought about what he'd said at the end of the night, standing on the wet sidewalk. There's a next time. And how he'd said it, which was not with the airy confidence of someone making a social promise they didn't intend to keep, but with the flat certainty of someone stating a fact. She'd spent 3 years with a man who'd said beautiful things in beautiful ways and had meant none of them at the structural level. She'd learned to hear the gap between language and intention. She was very good at it now, which was sometimes useful and sometimes just made her tired. She didn't hear a gap. That was the problem. She didn't know what to do with the absence of a gap. She put the coffee cup in the sink and went to bed and told herself to stop thinking about it, and spent 40 minutes thinking about it before she fell asleep. Her alarm went off at 5:30. She got up. Diane was waiting for her at the after-school program's supply closet, which was the closest thing they had to a private space. A narrow room off the main hallway that smelled of construction paper and old markers. At 4:15 the next afternoon, holding 2 cups of coffee from the machine in the break room that technically made coffee and practically made hot brown liquid that gestured in the direction of coffee. "Tell me everything," Diane said. She was 41, broad-shouldered, originally from Memphis, and had 0 patience for preamble. Ava took the cup. "It was fine. You called me at 11:30 on a Friday night and said, and I'm quoting directly, 'I need to tell you something, but not right now.' And then you hung up. That is not a 'it was fine' situation." "Someone had a cardiac event at the restaurant." Diane stared at her. "Are you serious?" "Elderly woman, table near ours. I helped stabilize her until the paramedics came." "And the date? He watched the whole thing." "And then what?" Ava leaned against the shelf. "He told me to come back and sit down. We stayed for another 40 minutes. He got me a car home." She paused. "He said there would be a next time." Diane drank her coffee and looked at her with the expression of someone processing several things at once. "How did he look at you? When you were helping the woman?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, How did he look at you? Ava was quiet for a second. Like he was seeing something, she said. I don't know how else to say it. Good scene or bad scene? I don't know yet. Diane made a sound that was not quite agreement and not quite skepticism, but lived somewhere useful between them. You like him. I don't know him. You talked to him on the phone 4 times, and then for 3 hours over dinner and watched each other handle a crisis. You know some of him. Some. Enough to know if you like what you know. Ava turned her coffee cup in her hands. The hallway outside the supply closet was filling with the after-school sounds. Kids arriving, backpacks hitting floors, the particular volume of 20 children who'd been contained in classrooms since 8 a.m. suddenly released into a space with fewer rules. He's not what I expected, she said finally. What did you expect? I don't know. Someone more polished. Someone who'd figured out how to be in his position and had smoothed down everything that didn't fit. He hasn't? He has, mostly. But there are places where it didn't take. She thought about the bourbon on the table, the way he'd talked about the instant noodles and the rubber band laptop, the specific precision with which he'd said, I'm lonely, without any of the protective language people usually wrapped around that word. He's more honest than I expected. It's uncomfortable. Why uncomfortable? Because I don't know what to do with it. She set the cup down on the shelf. I know what to do with people who perform. I know all the tells. I don't have a good system for people who just say the actual thing. Diane looked at her for a moment. Maybe you don't need a system, she said. Maybe you just need to keep talking to him. From outside the supply closet, a child's voice rose above the general noise. Ms. Miller, Ms. Miller, Daniel took my... Ava pushed off the shelf. Later, she said. You like him, Diane said again as she went. Ava didn't answer, which was itself an answer. The text came at 9:47 that night. She was on her couch with her laptop open and a spreadsheet of Maya's financial aid renewal documents on the screen, which was how she spent most evenings that didn't have other claims on them. The work wasn't glamorous, but it was specific and real, and she was good at it, and the financial aid office at DePaul had recently started recognizing her number, which she considered a professional milestone. The text said, Noah wanted me to tell you that the building set is finished. He also wanted me to tell you that he made a minor structural error on the east side, but he caught it and corrected it. And he says that means he's an engineer because engineers fix their own mistakes. I don't have the heart to tell him that's everyone. Ava read it twice. She was smiling before she finished the first read. She typed back, Tell him the error and correction is the whole job. That's not a consolation prize. That's the actual skill. 3 minutes passed. Then, I told him. He said, and I'm quoting, I know. He definitely didn't know, but he accepted the information with tremendous confidence. He sounds like you. A pause. Then, that is either a compliment or a warning, both. Another pause, longer. Then, are you free Saturday? She looked at the spreadsheet. She looked at her phone. She thought about the gap she was listening for and not finding. Saturday afternoon. I have something, she typed. Saturday evening works. Saturday evening, he wrote back. Somewhere with a better door policy. No head tilting maitre d', guaranteed. She set the phone down. She looked at the spreadsheet. She thought about how she'd told him she was tired of being careful, which was true, and which she had nonetheless immediately started second-guessing on the drive home, the way you said something true and then spent the next 12 hours wondering if it was too true. She picked up the phone again. For the record, she typed, I don't usually tell strangers I'm tired of being careful. His reply came back fast, faster than the others. I don't usually tell strangers I'm lonely. We're both off our game. She laughed. In the empty apartment at 9:50 on a Thursday, she laughed out loud. She put the phone down and went back to the spreadsheet and got through another 40 minutes of it before she realized she was still smiling. Saturday came with the particular quality that late October Saturdays in Chicago had. A sky that couldn't decide between gray and blue, a cold that wasn't brutal yet but was making its intentions clear, the smell of someone somewhere burning leaves even though you weren't technically supposed to do that inside city limits. Ethan picked her up. This surprised her. She'd expected the car service, the black sedan, the quiet driver, the efficient transfer from point to point. Instead, at 6:15, a dark blue SUV pulled up to her building and Ethan was behind the wheel looking slightly uncertain in a way that she was coming to recognize as his version of nerves. She got in. "You drive yourself?" she said. "Occasionally, when I'm not sure I want witnesses." "Witnesses to what?" "The restaurant I picked. It's much more casual than last time, but I'm second-guessing myself." Ava looked at him. He was in jeans and a dark jacket, which was different from the precise dress of last Friday, and made him look, she thought, more like the person she'd heard on the phone than the one she'd seen walk into Meridian. "Where are we going?" "It's a Thai place in Andersonville. It has 14 tables and no dress code, and the owner will probably talk to us about his daughter's soccer league for 8 to 10 minutes, whether we want him to or not." "That sounds great." "You don't have to say that. I'm not saying it to be nice. A man who will tell me about his daughter's soccer league for 8 to 10 minutes unprompted is my preferred dinner companion." Ethan looked at her sideways. "More than the jazz trio?" "Significantly more." He pulled away from the curb. The city moved past the windows, Bridgeport giving way to the connecting streets that stitched the south and north sides together, the neighborhoods cycling through their Saturday evening configurations. She watched it go. "How was your week?" he asked. "Long. 2 kids had a conflict that took 3 days to fully resolve. My sister found out she got into the honors nursing program, which is great, and also means her scholarship situation changes, and I've been on the phone with DePaul's financial aid office approximately 800 times. Are you her financial aid manager? I'm her financial everything manager. I'm very much looking forward to the day she can do it herself." She said it with affection, not resentment. She's going to be incredible when she gets there. She just needs someone to run interference on the administrative stuff right now because nobody explains how any of it works. Like, they just expect you to know. "How did you learn?" "I failed at it first, a lot." She looked at the passing street. "I lost a scholarship renewal my sophomore year because I missed a deadline I didn't know existed. It cost me a semester." She said it flatly, the way she said most things that had hurt at the time and had since been processed into fact. "I wasn't going to let that happen to Maya." "So you learned the whole system?" "I learned the whole system. I have a spreadsheet that is—" She paused. "It's genuinely impressive. I should feel weird about how proud I am of a financial aid spreadsheet." "You shouldn't." "I don't, really." She glanced at him. "You probably have people who do that kind of thing." "I have people who do most logistical things," he said. "It took me a while to figure out what that means for the stuff I actually have to do myself." "What does it mean?" He was quiet for a moment, hands easy on the wheel. "It means I'm very capable at the things money can hire for, and I have some noticeable gaps in everything else." He said it without self-pity, the same flat honesty she'd heard from him on Friday and hadn't known what to do with. "I had to learn how to do Noah's laundry because, for the first year, I kept sending it out. And he came home from school one day, upset because a kid in his class said something about his clothes smelling like a dry cleaner and not like home." Ava turned to look at him fully. "What did you do?" "I watched 4 YouTube tutorials on how to do laundry." A pause. "I may have done more research than strictly necessary. I have a very detailed understanding of water temperatures and fabric care that I cannot find other uses for." She laughed. "Did it fix the problem?" He hasn't complained since, which with Noah means either it's fine or he decided not to bother telling me, and I've accepted that I may never know which. "It's probably fine," she said. "Kids don't forgive that kind of thing quietly. If it was still a problem, you'd know." "That's reassuring." "I mean it as one." He glanced over at her. A quick look, just a second, and then back to the road. But there was something in it, a warmth that he didn't editorialize on, just let exist. The restaurant was called Chalerm, and it was everything he'd described. 14 tables, low light that came from paper lanterns strung across the ceiling, the smell of lemongrass and galangal so pervasive it hit you when you were still on the sidewalk outside. The owner, a small, energetic man named Chai, who was maybe 50 and seemed to be in constant motion between tables, greeted Ethan by name. "Mr. Cole, table 4, your usual. Then he looked at Ava with the assessing speed of someone who had an opinion about everything and wasn't diplomatic about it. New friend? Ava? Ethan said. She works with kids. Chai pointed at Ava immediately. You know about kids? Tell me. My daughter, she's 11. She wants to quit the soccer team, but I think she should stay. What do you think? Ava did not look at Ethan. Does she want to do something else instead, or does she just want to quit? Chai's pointing finger redirected to indicate that this was the correct question. She wants to do theater. The school has a program. Let her do theater. But soccer is... She's 11, Ava said gently but without wobble. She doesn't need to commit to anything at 11. She needs to find out what she loves. If it's theater, let it be theater. Chai stared at her for a moment. Then he looked at Ethan. I like her, he said, as though Ethan had asked. He led them to table 4. They ordered. Ethan deferred to her because she'd eaten here before, which turned out to be the correct call because she navigated the menu with the efficiency of someone who'd worked out what was exceptional and what was merely good. And when Chai had retreated toward the kitchen, Ethan said, You've been here before? There's a bus that stops 2 blocks away. I found it by accident about a year ago. She straightened the paper napkin on her lap. I come sometimes when I want to feel like I've done something nice for myself without spending a lot. What do you usually order? The pad see ew and the tom kha. Every time. I have no self-control when the menu is good enough. That's not a flaw. Tell that to my predictability. He leaned forward slightly. I find predictability underrated. People pretend they want surprises. Mostly they want to know what they're getting. You are extremely consistent in this opinion, she said. You said almost the same thing on our second phone call. He paused. You remember that? I remember things people say. She looked at him. You said consistency was the most underrated quality in a person, and I thought you were probably right, and also that it was a slightly lonely thing to believe. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Why lonely? Because it means you've spent time with a lot of inconsistency. He looked at her across the table, the paper lanterns throwing warm light, the sound of the kitchen in the back, Chai's voice carrying from 2 tables over as he delivered someone else's food with the same enthusiastic authority. And he didn't say anything for long enough that she wondered if she'd miscalculated. Yeah, he said finally. That's probably right. The dinner at Chalerm had a different quality than Meridian. Not better or worse, exactly. Different in the way that conversations go differently when neither person is performing anymore, when the first date scaffolding is mostly down and what's left is just the actual people. She told him about the case management years in more detail than she had on Friday. The specific case that had made her leave, a sibling group, 3 kids, a situation that had dragged through the system for 14 months before resolving in a way that was technically a positive outcome and had still felt, when she drove away from that last appointment, like something broken that couldn't be put back together the same way. I drove to the lake, she said. Parked at the lakefront and sat there for 2 hours and cried in my car. And then I drove home and I put in my notice the next morning. Did you know what you were going to do next? No, I had about 3 weeks of savings. She said it without drama. I figured I'd figure it out. And you did. I got very lucky with the after-school job. The timing lined up. If it had been 2 months earlier or 2 months later, I don't know. It wasn't luck. Partly luck. Maybe. But you also had the resume and the references and the skills from the case management years, which you got because you did a hard job that most people leave sooner. He picked up his water glass. The luck part was the timing. The rest was you showing up. She looked at him. You have a habit, she said, of reframing things. Is that bad? I don't know yet. I'm used to people either agreeing with my assessment or arguing with it. The reframe is different. How is it different? It takes the thing I said seriously enough to look at it from another angle, she said. Most people don't bother. He set down the glass. Most things are worth looking at from another angle. Is that the logistics background talking? Probably. Everything in supply chain is about angles. You think you understand a problem from one side. You look from another side. The whole thing looks different. He shrugged. It's a transferable skill, apparently. Ava was quiet for a moment. From the kitchen came the sound of something hitting a wok, a quick, fierce sizzle, and Chai's voice raised in what sounded like a creative dispute with whoever was cooking. The restaurant was 3/4 full, warm, the kind of place that had been the same for a long time and intended to remain so. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "You always can." "Last Friday, after the woman, after Margaret," she paused, "the way you looked at me when I came back to the table, what were you thinking?" He didn't answer immediately. He had a way of taking questions seriously that she hadn't encountered much. A pause that wasn't uncomfortable, just real, the pause of someone who was actually looking for the honest answer instead of the available one. "I was thinking," he said slowly, "that I'd spent a long time looking for something I couldn't articulate, and that I'd just seen it." "What was it?" "Someone who does what needs to be done," he said, "not for an audience, not because it reflects well, just because it needs doing." He looked at her. "That's rarer than you think." She held the look for a moment. Then she looked down at her plate. "I'm going to tell you something, and you can't make it a bigger deal than it is. Okay? When I walked into that restaurant Friday and saw how everyone was looking at me," she stopped, started again. "I've walked into rooms like that before, rooms where I'm clearly the wrong version of someone for the space, and I've learned to just push through it, but there's a cost." She turned her water glass on the table. "Every time you push through it, you spend a little bit of something to do it, and by the time I got to your table, I'd spent some. I was already a little bit depleted." "I know," he said. "I could see it." "And then you said—" She stopped. "I came here to meet you, not your clothes." "Yeah." She looked up. "I know it sounds small." "It doesn't sound small." "It sounds small in the retelling. In the moment it was—" She paused, searching for the right word and clearly being careful with it. "It landed, is what I'm saying. It actually landed." Ethan was quiet. He had the look of a man who wanted to say something and was making sure he had the right thing before he said it. "You know what landed for me?" he said finally. "What?" "The apology." "Which one?" "I apologized about 4 times. The one when you came back to the table after Margaret. You looked at me and you apologized for interrupting the evening." He shook his head slowly. "You had just spent 15 minutes keeping a woman calm and relaying medical information to emergency responders, and you sat back down and apologized. I was worried I'd ruined—" "You didn't ruin anything." His voice was even, but there was something under it. "But the fact that your first instinct was to apologize for doing something extraordinary—" He stopped. "I've been in rooms with people who've done much less and taken up much more space for it. It was—" He seemed to consider and discard several words. "It bothered me. Not at you, just on your behalf." Ava was very still. "I apologize too much," she said. "I know that." "Yeah. It's a—" She thought about it. "When you grow up being the person who keeps things from going wrong, you get very attuned to the moments when things could go wrong because of something you did, and the fastest way to manage that is to apologize preemptively." "Preemptive apology as logistics." "Exactly." She looked at him. "You really do hear people." "I try." He paused. "Though I'm told I'm better at listening than at everything else." "What's everything else?" "Staying present when I'm not in problem-solving mode. Actually saying what I mean instead of the structural version of what I mean." He turned his fork on the table. "Claire, Noah's mother, she used to say that talking to me felt like reading a report. Very clear, very well organized, no indication of how anyone felt about any of it. You don't do that with me." "I know." He said it simply, without making it into something. "I don't know why. I've been trying to figure it out." She thought about the phone calls. The easy way they'd moved from topic to topic, neither of them filling silence with noise, neither of them performing. She thought about how she'd told Diane that he was more honest than she'd expected and how that honesty had felt like the uncomfortable kind because she wasn't used to it. "Maybe it's because neither of us is trying to be impressive," she said. He looked at her. "Last Friday," she said, I walked in wearing a work uniform to a restaurant where everyone had on designer everything. There was nothing left to protect. I couldn't be impressive in that room if I tried. So She lifted one shoulder. I just was what I was. And that's easier. It shouldn't be, but yeah. I had no reason to perform either, he said. I'd already been sitting at that table alone for 40 minutes. The window for performing had closed. A pause. I think that's what the restaurant was, actually. The wrong choice for all the right reasons. How was that? If I'd picked Chalerm, first date, we would have been surrounded by all the context that makes people careful. You would have been dressed differently. You would have walked in differently. The evening would have started in a completely different key, and maybe we still would have gotten here, but maybe not. So the terrible maitre d' was actually doing us a favor. In the most indirect possible way, Ava laughed. And again, it was the real kind. The kind that moved through her whole face and changed it. Ethan had noticed this about her. She didn't have a social laugh that she deployed to manage rooms. She either laughed or she didn't. And when she did, it was because something had genuinely reached her. He found this extraordinarily hard to look away from.
Chai brought dessert that they hadn't ordered.
Small, sweet, with the explanation that it was a new thing his wife was trying, and he wanted opinions. They ate it and gave their opinions, which Chai received with the seriousness of a man taking field notes. Outside, the October night had gotten properly cold. They walked to the car and drove back south with the heat on and the radio at low volume. Something that wasn't identifiable, just sound, the kind of thing that made silence feel inhabited rather than empty. "What's Noah doing tonight?" she asked. "My mom has him, every other Saturday." He kept his eyes on the road. "She has opinions about how often he should see her that are generous to herself." "What does that mean?" "It means she thinks every other Saturday is probably not enough. And she says it in the specific way where she's not quite asking, but she's also not asking." "Do you want to give her more?" "I want—" He stopped. "It's complicated. My relationship with my mother is functional. Warm in the places it's warm, complicated in the places it's complicated." He seemed to decide something. "She had a specific idea of what I was supposed to do with my life. For a long time I was doing pieces of it, the success, the money, the trajectory. And then Claire left and I was a single father, and my mother's idea of what I was supposed to be doing shifted. And she communicated the shift in the way she communicates most things, which is sideways and with implication." "What's the implication?" "That I'm doing well, but I'm not doing enough. That Noah needs things I can provide materially, but not—" He paused. "She's not wrong. She's just not right about the solution." "What does she think the solution is?" He looked over at her briefly. "A partner. Someone in the house. Someone for Noah to see being present and consistent with me every day." Ava received that. "And you think?" "I think that's the right outcome if it's the right person," he said carefully. "I think bringing the wrong person in because Noah needs a model is worse than not bringing anyone." He'd know. Immediately. He watches adults the way you said. He's building a model of how people work. You can't fake your way past that. She looked at the city going past the window. The streets were quieter at this hour. The restaurant traffic thinned, the residential blocks settling into their weekend rhythms. "My dad was in the house," she said, "after his accident, present physically, not present any other way." She said it without bitterness, just the weight of fact. "I'd rather have had less presence and more, more intention." "Yeah. So I think you're right," she said. "About the wrong person." He nodded. He didn't add anything to it, which was the correct thing. They drove in quiet for a minute. The radio played something low. "Can I see him?" she said. He looked over. "What?" "Noah, at the program. That's not weird. He's already there. But maybe sometime outside of that." She paused. "Not as a thing, not as a meet-the-girlfriend situation. Just, is there room for that? Or is that too fast?" Ethan was quiet for long enough that she thought she'd miscalculated again. Then he said, "He asked about you." "When?" "Tuesday. He was working on the new building set, and I came to tell him dinner was ready, and he asked he called it my phone lady, which I will never live down. He asked how my phone lady was doing. You told him about me? He overheard me on the second call. He was supposed to be in bed. He paused. He said you had a nice voice. Ava made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and something more tender. What did you say? I said he should be asleep. Effective. He was asleep 3 minutes later. He glanced over. And then he asked again on Tuesday. Not about the date. I don't think he fully connects those concepts yet. Just about you specifically, the person with the nice voice who works at his school. She looked at her hands in her lap. What did you tell him? I said you were doing well. Good answer. Thank you. It took me a moment. She thought about a kid who paid attention to everything and was working out the rules of how people stayed. She thought about what it would mean to be in that equation, not as a solution, not as a role, just as a person who showed up. Let's see where this goes first, she said. Before the Noah piece, I want to be sure. Sure of what? That I mean what I think I mean about this. She looked at him. I don't want to be in his life and then not be. That's not fair to him. Ethan kept his eyes on the road. When he spoke, his voice had something in it that she hadn't heard there before. Not sentiment exactly, more like recognition. That's exactly the right thing to think about. I know. She looked back out the window. I told you, I've been figuring things out since I was 9. He didn't say anything, but his hand, which had been resting on the console between them, shifted slightly. Not quite reaching, not quite not, just shifted, like a question with no language attached. She looked at it for a second. She put her hand next to his. Not on top, not interlaced, just beside it, close enough that the warmth was mutual. Neither of them said anything about it. The radio played on. Chicago moved past the windows. The heat was on and the night was cold outside the glass, and the distance between Andersonville and Bridgeport was exactly long enough for 2 people to sit in the particular quiet of something neither of them was ready to name yet. He pulled up to her building. She took her hand back. Same deal as last time, she said, reaching for the door. I had a good time. Same deal, he said. She got out. Then she leaned back in through the open door. Tell Noah his structural error catch was engineer level. Don't tell him I said it. Let him think you thought of it. Ethan looked at her. Why? Because it'll mean more coming from you. She shut the door before he could answer. She went up to her apartment, and this time she didn't stand in the dark. She turned on the light immediately and sat down on the couch and looked at nothing in particular for a moment. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She picked it up. It was Ethan. I'll tell him. Good night, Ava. She set the phone down. Outside, a car passed. The radiator started up. Its familiar percussion, its reliable wrongness. The brick wall across the alley was the same brick wall it always was. The apartment was 380 square feet, and she was in it alone, and this was not news, and it was not dramatic, and it was the same as every night. It felt different, though. She wasn't entirely sure what to do with that. 3 weeks in, the thing between Ethan and Ava had no name, and both of them were, by unspoken agreement, leaving it that way. There had been 4 more evenings, Chalarm twice, because neither of them saw a reason to fix what wasn't broken. Once, a walk along the lakefront that had started as a suggestion and turned into 2 hours neither of them planned for. And once, just his kitchen, because Noah was at his grandmother's, and Ethan had said he was cooking, and she'd said she'd believe it when she saw it. He'd made pasta. It had been imperfect in specific, recoverable ways, slightly oversalted, the sauce broken, and then re-emulsified with the particular focus of a man who refused to accept a failed outcome. And they'd eaten it at his kitchen island and talked until 11:30, and she'd taken a cab home because it was too late for the bus. She thought about that evening more than the others, not because it was the most interesting, but because it was the most ordinary, and she'd sat at his kitchen island eating slightly oversalted pasta and felt something she didn't have a precise word for. Comfortable was too small. Safe was too loaded. It was more like the feeling of a room where the proportions were right, where you could breathe at the actual size you were. She hadn't told anyone except Diane, and even with Diane she'd been measured about it. Not secretive, just careful in the way that you were careful with things that were still forming, the way you didn't push on dough before it was ready. The problem was that other people had started to notice. It was Priya who brought it to Ethan first. She came into his home office on a Wednesday morning. He worked from home on Wednesdays, a boundary he'd set 3 years ago and enforced with more consistency than almost anything else in his professional life, because Wednesday was when he picked up Noah's school lunch, which Noah had strong opinions about and which Ethan had learned to navigate with the care of a trade negotiation. And she set a coffee on his desk and said, without preamble, "I've heard something." Ethan didn't look up from the document he was reviewing. "That's vague." Intentionally. Priya sat down across from him. She was small and precise and had a way of delivering information that reminded him of a very competent surgeon. Minimal incision, direct access to the thing. "Ryan Marsh knows you've been seeing someone." Now he looked up. "How does Ryan Marsh know anything about my personal life?" Ryan Marsh was on the Vantage board, the board Ethan had retained a seat on after the sale, against his better judgment and at the insistence of the acquiring company's CEO, who'd said Ethan's continued involvement was part of the strategic value. Ryan Marsh was 54, third-generation money, and had the specific quality of a man who believed that his opinions about other people's choices were both solicited and valuable. "He apparently had dinner at Meridian 3 weeks ago," Priya said. "Friday." Ethan was quiet. "He recognized you," she continued. "He didn't approach. Apparently his wife told him not to interrupt. But he saw you with someone." A pause. "He described her to someone who then mentioned it to someone who then mentioned it to me at a thing on Monday." "And what exactly did Ryan Marsh describe?" Priya's expression stayed neutral, in the practiced way of someone who was conveying information they personally found distasteful. "He said you were having dinner with a woman in a service uniform." Another pause. "His exact words, as reported to me, were, 'Ethan Cole apparently has interesting taste.'" The room was quiet. Ethan set down his pen. He had a particular stillness that came over him when something made him angry. Not the hot, reactive anger of someone who'd say something they'd regret, but a colder, more considered version that Priya had seen twice in 4 years and had learned to read accurately. "When's the next board call?" he said. "Thursday. Is Ryan on it?" "Yes." "Good." He picked the pen back up. "Thank you for telling me." Priya stayed where she was. "There's more." He waited. "James Whitfield called yesterday." James Whitfield was the CEO of the acquiring company, the one who'd insisted on Ethan staying on the board. A man Ethan respected technically and found personally exhausting. He'd like to have lunch. He said he wants to talk strategy, but he called my line instead of yours, which means he wanted me to know he was calling, which means he wants to have a conversation about something he thinks I'll push back on, and he's trying to create a paper trail of reaching out through official channels first. Ethan said it flatly. "What does he actually want to talk about?" "I think it's related to the same thing." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "My personal life is not a board matter." "No," Priya said. "It isn't." She stood up. "But Ryan Marsh doesn't know that, and James Whitfield is going to let Ryan Marsh make noise until it becomes useful to stop him, which means someone is going to say something to you directly in the next 2 weeks. She paused at the door. "I thought you should know before they did." She left. Ethan sat in his home office for a moment, looking at nothing. Then he picked up his phone and sent Ava a text. "Are you free Thursday evening?" Her reply came back during his next call. "What happened?" He stared at it. He'd sent a completely neutral message. He typed back, "Why do you ask?" "Because you usually say something about the plan when you ask. 'Are you free Saturday?' is always followed by 'I was thinking the lakefront,' or 'Chai is apparently making something new.' 'Are you free Thursday?' with nothing after it means something happened. He read that twice. 'I'll tell you Thursday,' he typed. 'Okay,' she wrote. 'I'm free.'" He told her at Chalarm because it was a Wednesday, so Chalarm was closed, which meant they went to a noodle place 2 blocks over that Ava knew, and that had the same small table's warm light quality without the same specific owner, and over bowls of broth that steamed in the November air, He told her about Ryan Marsh and the Meridian sighting and Priya's Wednesday morning delivery. Ava listened without interrupting. She had a way of doing this, a quality of attention that was not passive but not intrusive either, just present, taking in information without performing a reaction to it. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "So someone on your board saw me," she said. "Yes." "In the uniform?" "Yes." And he described it as interesting taste. That's the reported version. What do you think the unreported version said? Ethan met her eyes. Something less polite. She nodded. She picked up her chopsticks and looked at her bowl. Are you going to get pressure about it? Probably. What kind of pressure? The kind that's framed as concern and is actually just discomfort with something that doesn't fit a particular picture. He turned his own chopsticks on the table. Ryan Marsh has a very specific idea of what the people in his orbit are supposed to look like and do and marry. He's been that way his entire career. It's not personal to you. He'd have the same reaction to any deviation from the template. That doesn't make it not personal to me. No, he said. You're right. It doesn't. She looked at him. Are you going to tell me it doesn't matter what they think? No. Good. Because I've been told that before by people who lived in worlds where it actually didn't affect them, and it's not useful. It matters, he said. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't. These are people I work with, and they have a reach that extends into my professional life in ways that can be inconvenient if they decide to make them inconvenient. He paused. What I can tell you is that I'm not going to adjust what I do because Ryan Marsh has an opinion. Have you adjusted things before? For what people in your world think? The question landed with the directness she usually had about the things that mattered. He sat with it honestly. I've made choices that were partly shaped by what fit the expected picture, he said. Not consciously, most of the time. But yeah, I've dated people who looked right for the context and discovered later that looking right for the context was most of what they had. So, in that sense, yes. A pause. I'm not doing that anymore. I don't think I could, actually. I don't have the appetite for it. She was still looking at him. Why are you telling me this? Because you should know what you're walking into. Is that the only reason? He looked back at her steadily. No. She waited. I'm telling you because I don't want to be the person who manages information to manage your reactions. You said you were tired of being careful. I'm trying to not make you do that with me. Ava was quiet for a long moment. Then she picked up her chopsticks and ate a bite of noodles, and he recognized this as the thing she did when she was processing something real. The small domestic action that kept her hands occupied while her mind worked. Okay, she said finally. Okay, what? Okay, I hear you, and I appreciate it. She looked at him. I'm also going to be honest with you about my reaction because that seems like the rule we're playing by. It is. My reaction is that I've spent my whole life being the person who doesn't fit the picture, and I've made my peace with that in most spaces. But there's a version of being with someone who runs in a different world where I become the thing that needs to be managed and explained, and either defended or apologized for, and that... She stopped, set down her chopsticks. That is the one thing I don't think I can do. I have too much left to spend on too many other things. The table was very quiet. I understand that, he said. Do you? Yes. He didn't elaborate immediately, which meant he was finding the right thing, not avoiding the question. I grew up watching my father get managed and explained by systems that treated him like a variable. He was the logistics worker, and every context he walked into as anything other than that required him to justify himself. I watched it happen for 20 years. He looked at her. I became someone in a different position, and I've spent time thinking about what I owe to that because of what I watched. I'm not going to take the Ryan Marsh side of this. Not for any version of convenience. She held his gaze. Okay, she said again, but differently this time. Okay? I believe you. She picked up her chopsticks again. Now eat your noodles before they get cold. Cold broth is a tragedy. He picked up his chopsticks. Can I ask you something? She said. Yes. What are you going to say to Ryan Marsh? I'm going to say nothing to Ryan Marsh directly. I'm going to say nothing that requires me to defend a personal choice to a professional colleague because doing that establishes that it's a defensible matter, which it isn't. He ate. What I'm going to do is be consistent and clear that it's not a subject. And if Ryan Marsh continues to be Ryan Marsh, I'll address it in the way I address professional problems, which is directly and without drama. You've thought about this. I thought about it Wednesday through today. She looked at him sideways. Are you always this methodical about everything? Yes. Does it ever exhaust you? Sometimes. He paused. Does it bother you? She thought about it honestly. No, she said. It's actually, I grew up around chaos and I built the spreadsheet brain as a response to it. We're just different versions of the same thing. Control is a survival mechanism. Exactly. She ate for a moment. Though I think you've taken it further than me. My spreadsheets are about other people. Yours are about everything. Is that a problem? It's an observation. She glanced at him. The kitchen pasta night. What about it? You told me afterward that the sauce broke and you fixed it. You spent like 3 minutes explaining the exact process by which it broke and the exact technique by which you recovered it. The emulsification process is actually, I know, and it was interesting, but the detail, she smiled. It was interesting that you needed me to know you'd solved it. Like if you just presented me with a plate of fixed pasta without the explanation, some part of the equation was incomplete. He was quiet. I'm not criticizing it, she said. I just noticed. You notice things. Occupational habit. He turned his water glass on the table. You're right, he said. I have a hard time letting outcomes stand without explaining the process. It's the thing Claire called the report thing, the information delivery without the feeling. Except you do have the feeling. I know where it is. I'm not always sure how to route it to the surface. She looked at him with something in her expression that was warm and also careful, the way she looked at things she was taking seriously. You just told me you spent 48 hours thinking about how to handle Ryan Marsh because of what it might mean for me. That's the feeling. You don't need to emulsify it. He stared at her. The pasta analogy is going to haunt me, he said. She laughed. Good. It should. The board call was on Thursday afternoon. Ryan Marsh said nothing. He was present on the call, audible in the background sound of muted breathing and the occasional shuffle of someone repositioning, and he said nothing about Ethan's personal life or Meridian or interesting taste. He asked 3 technical questions about the Q4 integration timeline and signed off at the hour mark. Ethan sat in his home office for a few minutes after the call ended. He didn't know if that was better or worse. The thing about people like Ryan Marsh was that silence wasn't the same as resolution. It was just deferral, and deferral had its own timeline that you didn't control. He'd deal with it when it materialized. What materialized first was something he hadn't anticipated. What? His mother called on Sunday. Dorothy Cole was 61, retired from a career in hospital administration that had required her to be 3 times as organized as anyone around her for 30 years. And she had the specific quality of a woman who had done difficult things and believed, on the basis of this, that she understood difficult things in general. She loved Ethan in the absolute non-negotiable way that certain mothers love their children. Not without criticism, not without expectation, but without any possibility of the love itself being conditional. He knew this. He had known it his whole life. It didn't make the calls easier. "How are you?" she said when he picked up. "Good. Busy. Noah told me you've been cooking more." "I've been trying." He said the pasta was salty. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. It was slightly oversalted. He said significantly, "He's 8. His palate is calibrated to chicken nuggets." Ethan, his mother's voice shifted, the warm version giving way to the other one, the version she'd used to get him to look at her when he was small and had said something she wanted him to actually hear. He also said there was a woman there. The room was quiet. He mentioned it casually, Dorothy continued. You know how he does. He just says a thing like, it's not the thing he most wants to tell you, and you have to receive it correctly. She paused. He said she had a nice voice and that she worked at his school. Ethan said nothing, waiting. I'm not calling to interrogate you, she said. I want to be clear about that. Okay? I'm calling because Noah told me something else. Another pause, longer this time. He said you laughed in the kitchen. He came downstairs for water and he heard you laughing from his room and he said, her voice changed slightly. Not sentimental, Dorothy Cole was never sentimental, but something real moved through it. He said it sounded different than your regular laugh. Ethan sat very still. He's 8, he said, because he didn't have anything else. 8-year-olds notice everything, she said. That's the whole thing about 8-year-olds. Mom, I'm not pushing. I told you I wasn't going to push. She sounded like she believed this. I just want you to know that your son heard you laugh and thought it was different and it made him happy enough that he told his grandmother. A beat. That's all. He looked at the window. The November sky was flat and white, the kind of day that wasn't actively bad but was reserving its judgment. Her name is Ava, he said. His mother was quiet for long enough that he knew she was deciding how to receive the information. How did you meet? She asked finally. She works in Noah's after-school program. She helped him with something. He told me about it. I called to say thank you and we talked for 22 minutes. 22 minutes is specific. I noticed. Dorothy made a sound that was not quite a laugh. What's she like? Ethan thought about it. He thought about a woman crossing a restaurant with no hesitation to reach someone who needed help. He thought about the way she talked about her sister with the pride of someone who had invested genuinely and asked nothing back. He thought about her hand beside his on the console, not holding but close, a question without language. She's direct, he said. She notices things. She worked case management for 2 years and left because she has an actual threshold for suffering that she was honest about. She's been holding things together since she was 9, and she knows it, and she's not precious about it. He paused. She told me she was tired of being careful. I think she means it. His mother was quiet. She's not what you're picturing, he said. It wasn't an accusation, just a fact. How do you know what I'm picturing? Because I know what picture I spent 3 weeks anticipating you picturing. A long pause. Ethan, I want you to be happy. I've wanted that since before you were born, and I haven't stopped, whatever form it takes. I know. But I also want to say... She stopped, started again. I want to say that the people around you are going to have opinions. You know that. And I know you know that. And I also know that knowing something doesn't make it not a pressure. I'm aware. I just want you to be clear about what you're choosing and why. Not because I doubt you, because I know what it costs when the people around you don't understand something and they say so. I know what it costs, Mom. She heard something in his voice. I'm sorry. I'm not doing this right. You're doing it fine. I'm doing it in the way where I mean one thing and it's coming out as another. She exhaled. I just want you to be happy, and I want it to be the right thing for Noah. That's all. Those are also the only 2 things I want. Then we agree. We usually do. In the end. She made a small sound, affectionate and slightly exasperated, the signature sound of their relationship for 3 decades. Bring her to dinner sometime, when you think it's right, not before. I'll think about it. You'll think about it for 6 months and then decide. Probably 4. I'll mark my calendar. He laughed. The real kind, short, and surprised. Tell Noah I'll see him next Saturday, she said, and tell him the pasta story was very entertaining. I'll tell him nothing. Smart choice. She hung up. Ethan sat with the phone in his hand for a moment. He thought about Noah, downstairs for water, hearing a laugh from the kitchen that sounded different. He thought about what it meant that an 8-year-old could hear the difference. He told Ava about the call on Tuesday evening, during one of what had become their near-daily calls, a thing that had evolved without either of them formally proposing it. The phone calls migrating from weekly to several times a week to something that was simply part of the shape of the days. She listened, and when he got to the part about Noah hearing the laugh and finding it different, she was quiet for a beat. That's a lot of information for a kid to have about his parent, she said. He pays attention. He really does. She paused. How do you feel about your mom knowing? Relieved, mostly. She would have found out and been hurt that I didn't tell her, and this way it was on my terms and with some framing. What about the dinner invitation? The eventual dinner invitation. She's giving me time. More or less than you expected. He thought about it. About the same. She's pushing, but in the way she's always pushed, with the gentleness that has steel under it, so you always know the steel is there even when you can't feel it directly. I know that type, Ava said. My mom's version is less gentle. How is your mom? Working too much and sleeping too little and telling me she's fine every time I ask, which means she's probably fine, but she's also definitely not going to tell me if she's not. She paused. I need to get out there this week. It's been almost 3 weeks. Where does she live? Pilsen still, same house I grew up in. A pause. It needs work. It's always needed work. The roof has been a concern since I was 16. She said it the way she said most things about her family's circumstances. Not with self-pity, just with the matter-of-fact quality of someone who had looked at a situation for a long time and was done being surprised by it. What kind of work? The roof is the big one. There's also a plumbing issue that's been intermittent for 2 years, which you'd think would be the priority, but every time I bring it up, my mother says she knows a guy. She doesn't know a guy. She knows a man who helped with something once 15 years ago, and whose number she may or may not still have. Do you have a contractor you trust? Ava was quiet. I'm asking as a straightforward question, he said, not as a thing. There's no such thing as a straightforward question about money when the money is yours and not mine. Fair, he paused. I wasn't going to offer money. What were you going to offer? I know a contractor. Marcus, my brother, used him when he was in Chicago last year. He's reliable and he prices fairly and he actually shows up. She was quiet again. I can give you the number, Ethan said. And that's it. You call him, you talk to him, you figure out what makes sense. I'm not involved beyond the referral. And if I ask what something costs, and it's not something I can do right now, then you tell him it's not the right time, and he says okay, and that's the end of it. She exhaled slowly. He'd learned to hear the difference in her exhales. This one was the processing kind, the kind that meant she was working through a resistance that she was also simultaneously evaluating for whether the resistance was reasonable. Okay, she said, send me the number. I'll send it tonight. Ethan. Yeah? Thank you. For the number, just the number. The number, he said. That's all. She went to Pilsen on Wednesday. Her mother, Rosa Miller, was 56 and had the look of a woman who had run on determination for so long that the determination had become load-bearing. Remove it and something structural would fail. She was small, like Ava, with the same direct eyes and the same quality of attention, though where Ava's attention was careful and considered, Rosa's was immediate and slightly relentless. The attention of someone who'd learned to read situations fast, because slow was a luxury she hadn't had. She had dinner on the table when Ava arrived, the specific dishes that were Rosa's love language, the ones that took time and were never acknowledged as taking time. Ava ate them and talked about the program and Maya's honors track and the financial aid spreadsheet updates, the ordinary maintenance of the family system, and Rosa listened and added her own pieces, and the conversation did what their conversations always did, which was cover a lot of ground without going very deep. It was over dishes that her mother said, "You look different." Ava kept washing. "I look the same." "You look rested." "I've been sleeping okay." "More than okay." Rosa dried a bowl and looked at her sidelong, the maternal X-ray. "Something's going on." "Things are going fine." "Ava Gabriella Miller, I have known you since before you were born." Ava put down the dish. "There's someone I've been seeing." Rosa set down her dish towel. "It's early," Ava said quickly. "It's very early. I don't know what it is yet." "Who is he?" "His name is Ethan. His son is in my program." Her mother's expression moved through several rooms rapidly. "How old?" 32. "And the mother?" "Not in the picture. Not in a bad way. They co-parent. She's in another city. It's functional." She picked the dish back up. She stopped. "What?" She thought about how to say it without either overselling or underselling, which was the challenge with her mother, who had a sensitive detector for both. "He's the kind of person who does what he says," she said finally. "I'm still getting used to it." Rosa was quiet for a moment, then, "What does he do?" "He sold a software company. He's on boards now. He does investment work." She kept her eyes on the dish. "Money. A lot of it." The kitchen was very still. "Ava, I know. I'm not saying Mom, I know what you're not saying, and I also know what you are saying underneath it. You're saying be careful, and I am." She set the dish down and turned. "I've been careful my whole life. I'm trying to do something different." Rosa looked at her for a long time with the specific look that mothers have when they can see exactly what their child is feeling and are deciding whether to say so. "Is he good to you?" she asked. "Yes." "Does he see you? The real you, not—" "Yes." She said it without hesitation, which surprised her when she heard herself say it. "Yeah, he does." Rosa picked up her dish towel again. She folded it with the neat precision that was her version of collecting herself. "Then I want to meet him," she said. "When it's time." "It's not time yet." "I know. When it is." "Okay." "Okay." Rosa unfolded the dish towel and refolded it. "He'd better know how to eat. He made pasta. He oversalted it." "That I can work with," Rosa said, with the air of a woman who had fixed worse. What Ava didn't tell her mother, what she didn't tell anyone, but because it was the thing she was still turning over, still examining from different angles the way you examined something you weren't sure how to classify, was what had happened the previous Saturday. She'd been at the program when Noah came in at 3:15, trailing his backpack by one strap, and spotted her from across the room. He'd crossed to her directly. Not the meandering path that kids usually took, circling toward things they wanted while pretending not to want them. A direct line, which told her something about what he'd decided about her. "Hi," he said. "Hi, Noah. Did my dad tell you about the East Side correction? He told me you called yourself an engineer." Noah's expression was the studied nonchalance of someone who had prepared for this topic. "I mean, I did fix it." "You did," she said. "That's the job." He seemed to relax fractionally, the way kids did when an adult confirmed what they already suspected was true. He dropped his backpack on the floor, which she let pass because this wasn't the moment, and sat down at the table across from her. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Fixing the October schedule. Someone made an error in the original spreadsheet." He leaned forward to look at it. "That column is wrong," he said, pointing. She looked. "You're right. That happens when you don't lock the formula range." She turned to look at him fully. "How do you know that?" "My dad showed me." He said it casually, the way kids mention their parents when their parents were simply a reliable background fact of the world. "He has a spreadsheet for my building sets. He locks all the formula ranges." "Of course he does. He's kind of intense about spreadsheets." "I know." Noah looked at her then, not with the careful scrutiny that she'd noticed before, the watch and assess quality that Ethan had described, but with something more open, the look of a kid who'd made a preliminary decision and was moving past the cautiousness into something else. "He seems better," Noah said. Ava went still. "What do you mean?" Noah picked up a pencil from the table and turned it over in his hands. "He's been more—" He seemed to search for the word with the precision of a child who took language seriously. "More here. Like when I talk to him, he's actually in the room." She didn't say anything. "He used to do this thing," Noah continued, still looking at the pencil, "where I'd be talking to him and he'd be looking at me, but you could tell he was somewhere else, in his head." He paused. "He doesn't do it as much." Ava was very careful. "People have good weeks and less good weeks," she said. "It's not always one thing." "I know." Noah set the pencil down. "I'm not saying it's you." She looked at him. He looked back at her, and he was 8 years old and also in certain specific ways very old. "I'm just saying he's better," he said, "and I noticed." He picked up his backpack and went to join the other kids at the craft table, trailing the strap again. Ava sat for a moment. She thought about a man at a kitchen island eating pasta and laughing, and a kid upstairs getting water and hearing something different in the sound of it. She thought about what it meant to matter to someone before you decided to matter to them, how it happened quietly in the spaces between the things you were paying attention to, and then one day you looked and it was already true. She fixed the spreadsheet formula. She locked the range. She thought about it for the rest of the day and that night and the next morning on the bus, and she didn't say anything to anyone because she was still figuring out what to call it, and she'd learned a long time ago that some things needed to be known before they needed to be named. But she knew. She looked at the thing she'd been circling and she knew. The contractor's name was Phil Reyes, and he showed up at Rosa Miller's house on a Thursday morning in mid-November, driving a white truck with a magnetic sign on the door and a clipboard that he clearly intended to actually use. Ava had called him the week before, using the number Ethan had sent, and had the conversation she always had with contractors. Direct, specific, somewhat braced for the moment when she'd have to say she needed time to think about the cost, which was usually the polite way of saying the cost was beyond what was currently possible. Phil had been straightforward in return. He'd come look, he'd give her an honest number, she could do with it what she could do. He was on the roof for 40 minutes. He walked the perimeter of the house with the particular slow attention of someone building a complete picture. He checked the plumbing situation in the kitchen and the bathroom and made notes without commentary. Rosa followed him through most of it with her arms crossed, not hostile, just the body language of a woman who had been in her house for 28 years and wasn't going to pretend it belonged to someone else. Ava waited in the kitchen. Phil came in, sat down at the table, and opened his clipboard. "Good news is the structure is solid," he said. "The bones are fine. You've got 2 things that need to happen now, and 2 things that can wait 6 months. He put the estimate in front of Ava. "The roof is the now problem. The plumbing I can stabilize today with 1 fix that'll hold, but it needs full replacement within a year, ideally spring." Ava looked at the number. She kept her face neutral, the skill she'd developed at age 9 and refined ever since. The skill of reading a number and not letting it read you back. "Can you give me a few days?" she said. "Take what you need. The roof can wait until January, but not much past that. You want to get ahead of the freeze cycles." He left. Rosa walked him out. Ava sat at the kitchen table and looked at the estimate. The now number was manageable, barely, if she moved some things around. The full plumbing replacement in the spring was not manageable at all without something changing. She ran the math 3 ways, the way she always did, hoping one version would tell a different story. It told the same story each time. Rosa came back in and made coffee. She set a cup in front of Ava without asking. "What's the damage?" she said. Ava told her the numbers. Rosa sat down and was quiet for a moment with her coffee cup in both hands, looking at the surface of the liquid. "I have some savings," she said. "Not enough, but some." "I know. I know what you have, Mom. I've been helping manage it for a while." She said it gently, without the sharp edge that could have been there. "I'm going to figure it out." "You always figure it out." "Because it always needs figuring out." She said it flat, not bitter, just true. "I'm working on a plan for the spring number. I just need a few weeks." Rosa looked at her. The maternal x-ray again, the one that went all the way through. "Does your Ethan know about this?" He's not in this conversation. I'm not asking for money from him. I'm asking if he knows." Ava wrapped her hands around the coffee cup. "We haven't talked about it." "Why not?" "Because it's not his problem." Rosa made a sound that was not quite disagreement and not quite agreement. "Sometimes," she said carefully, "letting someone help you with a problem is not the same as making it their problem." "Mom, I'm just saying." "You're just saying the thing that sounds like one thing and is actually another thing." Ava looked at her. "I've spent my whole life being self-sufficient because we had to be. It's in my bones. I don't know how to let someone into that without feeling like I'm falling." Rosa was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I let your father's situation become mine alone because I was too proud to ask for help until asking was the only option left. And by the time I asked, the help available was much smaller than what I'd needed 3 years earlier." She set down her cup. "I'm not telling you to ask. I'm telling you not to confuse pride with principle." Ava looked at the estimate on the table. She thought about what Ethan had said. "I'm not involved beyond the referral." The way he'd said it, not as a limit, but as a boundary he was offering her, a way of keeping the thing manageable while still making it better. She folded the estimate and put it in her bag. "I'll think about it," she said, which, in the Miller family language, meant she already had. Pshet, she didn't bring it up that week, or the week after. What she did instead was notice things, the way the weeks had organized themselves around the calls and the evenings together, not dependently, not desperately, but with the comfortable shape of something that had been incorporated into the structure. She noticed that she made fewer lists of reasons to be cautious, and more simply went ahead with the things she'd been cautious about. She noticed that she'd started to describe Ethan to Diane in present tense, rather than the past and speculative tense of early relationship uncertainty, and that Diane had noticed this and had said nothing about it, which was its own form of commentary. She noticed that when Noah looked at her now, it was with the specific ease of a kid who had decided something and moved past the deciding. That last one was the one she sat with longest. It was the second week of December when it happened. Not a dramatic collision, more the gradual arrival of something that had been building pressure from several directions simultaneously. The afternoon program was running a holiday craft project, the kind that required significant preparation and the particular organized chaos of 20 children working with glue and glitter and personal opinions about what their cards should look like. Ava was at the supply station helping a second grader who was devastated because her snowflake had torn. A genuine, full-feeling devastation, the kind that adults forgot to take seriously. When her phone buzzed in her pocket, she let it go. It buzzed again. Then again. At the next natural pause, she checked it. 3 texts from Diane, who was across the room helping someone with scissors. "Did you see the notification? Check the program email." She checked. The email was from the program director, a woman named Sandra Okafor, who ran the administrative side of their after-school network with the efficiency of someone who'd been underfunded for so long that efficiency was the only remaining variable. It had gone to all staff. The subject line was, "Funding Update. Please read." Ava read it standing at the supply station with glitter on her left hand. The city's education supplemental funding had been restructured. The after-school network, which ran 12 programs across 5 neighborhoods and employed 34 people, had lost a significant portion of its grant base in the reallocation. The programs were not closing, the email was careful to say, but there would be staffing adjustments. A meeting was scheduled for Friday. Ava read it twice. She looked up and found Diane looking at her from across the room. They looked at each other for a long moment, over the heads of 20 kids making holiday cards. Diane lifted her shoulders slightly. "Yeah." Well, the Friday meeting was held in the small conference room at the network's administrative offices on Damen, a room that fit 12 people comfortably and was currently holding 18, which meant some people were standing against the wall and the air was slightly insufficient. Sandra Okafor was a woman who didn't soften things. Not out of cruelty, but out of the belief that people deserved accurate information rather than managed information. She stood at the front of the room and told them the number. The funding cut was substantial. In order to maintain all 12 programs, they would need to reduce staff hours across the board, 15% across all positions, effective January. 15% of Ava's hours was a specific number. She ran it while Sandra was still talking. She was good at that, running numbers quietly while appearing to pay attention, the skill set of a person who had always had to know the math faster than the conversation moved. It was not a catastrophic number. It was a manageable number, in the way that things were manageable when you already had very little margin and had become expert at managing very little margin. But it arrived at the same time as the roof estimate and the spring plumbing number, and the 3 things together created a math problem that didn't have a clean solution. She drove home after the meeting. She sat in the parking spot behind her building, the one that was technically not assigned to her, but that nobody else had claimed in 8 months. And she sat in the car and let the thing settle over her, the way she did with bad news, giving it its full weight before she decided what to do with it. Then she called Ethan. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey." "Hey." She stopped. A pause. "What happened?" She told him. The funding cut. The hours. The roof estimate she hadn't mentioned yet, and the spring plumbing number, and the math that was currently not resolving cleanly. She told him all of it, which was not something she'd planned to do. It came out in the direct, organized way that things came out of her when she'd been holding them alone and the container had gotten full. Not chaotic, just complete, all the pieces present. When she finished, there was a silence. "Okay," he said. "Okay, what?" "Okay, I heard it. I'm just—" Another brief pause. "I'm sitting with it. You don't need to solve it. I know I don't. I'm not telling you so you can fix it. I just needed to—" She stopped. "I wanted to tell you, that's all." "I know." His voice was quiet and even. "I'm glad you told me." She leaned her head back against the headrest. The parking lot was lit by a single orange safety light that made everything look slightly amber. A few snowflakes were coming down, the first real ones of the season, soft and tentative. "The roof number," he said. "You said Phil gave you an estimate. Ethan, I'm not going to offer money. I'm asking a question." It felt like a lead-in. It was a question. A pause. "You said you were going to figure out the spring number. Do you have a plan?" "I have the beginning of a plan. I have to move some things around." "What things?" "The emergency fund." Silence. "That's the last thing you should be touching," he said. Carefully, not with alarm, but with the specific precision of someone who understood financial risk. "I know, which is why it's not my first choice. It's the option I use if the other options don't work." She turned her water glass on the center console. No water glass, just the old habit of the gesture. "I'm applying for a supplemental grant through the city's workforce development program. It's not guaranteed, but I qualify, and the timeline works if I start the application this week." He was quiet. "That's a good plan," he said. "You sound surprised." "I'm not surprised. He stopped. "You'd been holding this for 2 weeks. The roof, the numbers. You didn't say anything." "I was figuring out whether it was a thing to say." "And now it is?" "Now it's—" "Yes, I decided it was." She looked at the snowflakes coming down through the orange light. "I told you I don't know how to let someone into the hard stuff without feeling like I'm falling. This is me trying to not do that." He didn't say anything for a moment, then, "How does it feel?" "Terrifying," she said, "and also fine." "Both at the same time." "Both at the same time." He exhaled, not a sigh, just a breath, the kind that comes when something releases slightly. "Thank you for telling me." "Don't thank me. It makes it weird." "Okay." A pause. "The grant application. I know someone at Workforce Development. Not a contact I'd use for anything, just someone I met at a thing a while back. I can find out if there's anything useful about the process, the common rejection points. Information only." "Information only?" "That's all I've got." She thought about her mother's voice. "Don't confuse pride with principle." "Okay," she said. "Information is useful." December moved with the particular compressed quality of Decembers. Too many things in too little time. The year accelerating toward its own end. The grant application went in on a Wednesday. The information Ethan's contact had provided turned out to be genuinely useful. There was a common structural error in first-time applications involving the budget justification section, and Ava's original draft had made exactly that error. She fixed it. The application was clean. She didn't know for 3 weeks whether it had mattered. In the meantime, the other things continued. She and Ethan had their first real fight on a Saturday afternoon in his kitchen. Not a dramatic explosion, neither of them were built for that, but the quieter, more specific kind of conflict that happened when two people with strong structural personalities ran directly into each other's methods. It started over something small. He'd mentioned in passing that he'd spoken to Phil Reyes again. Not about Rose's house. He'd been clear about that, and she believed him. But he'd asked Phil, as a general professional inquiry, about typical costs and timelines for the kind of work Rose's house needed, and he'd mentioned it to Ava as useful context. She'd gone very still. "What exactly did you say to him?" she asked. "I asked him general questions about, did you mention my mother's house?" "No, I asked in general terms. Ethan." Her voice was even but had something under it. "I asked you not to be involved beyond the referral." "I wasn't involved. I asked general questions. You went back to the person I hired, outside of my knowledge, and gathered information about my situation. She looked at him directly. That's involvement. That's a workaround. He stopped. She watched him process it. The specific process of a man who had done something with good intentions and was receiving accurate information about its effect and was deciding whether to defend the intention or acknowledge the impact. You're right, he said. I know I'm right. I was trying to be useful in a way that didn't feel intrusive. I understand the intention. The intention was fine. The execution was, you went around me. Even if it was small, you went around me. He was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry. Thank you. I'll tell you before I do anything adjacent to your situation, even if I think it's small. She looked at him. That's what I need. I know. He turned his coffee cup on the counter. Can I say one more thing? You can say it. The instinct to do something, to find a way to be useful even when I've been told not to be involved, it's not going to go away. That's just how I'm wired. What I can do is route it through you instead of around you. She considered that. It was honest, the kind of honest that she'd learned to recognize from him, where he named a limitation instead of promising to erase it. Route it through me, she said, not around. Through. Yes. Okay. She picked up her own coffee. Don't do it again. I won't. They stood in the kitchen in the kind of silence that followed a real conversation. Not comfortable, not uncomfortable, just present. She thought about how different this was from the fights she'd had before, which had mostly been characterized by the other person either escalating or retreating. He'd done neither. He'd just absorbed the accurate information and adjusted. She thought about what it meant to fight with someone and trust that the thing would still be standing when you were done. Are you okay? He asked. Yes. She looked at him. I'm okay. Are you? Yeah. He paused. I don't like it when I mess up something with you. You didn't mess up the whole thing. You made one wrong call. Still. Ethan. She set down the cup. People make wrong calls. What matters is what you do with the information. She looked at him levelly. You took it well. That matters. He looked at her for a moment with the expression she'd come to recognize as the one where something had landed and he was deciding whether to say so or just let it be. He let it be. Noah wants to show you the new set, he said. When you're here next time. He's been mentioning it approximately every 12 hours. What's the new set? A suspension bridge. He's deeply invested in the engineering accuracy. He paused. He looked up how suspension bridges actually work. For research. He's 8. I know. That's... She stopped. That's a you trait. He almost smiled. I've been told. She met Noah officially, outside the program context, in the space of Ethan's apartment, as a person rather than a staff member, on a Sunday afternoon in late December, 2 weeks before Christmas. She'd known it was coming. They talked about it carefully, in the way they talked about things that had weight, not avoiding it, but not rushing it either. Ethan had mentioned to Noah that a friend was coming over, and Noah, who was 8 and had a child's accurate radar for what adults were actually saying, had said, "The phone lady?" And Ethan had said yes, and Noah had apparently nodded and gone back to his bridge. She brought soup. Not a gesture. She'd been making a double batch of the Tom Kha recipe she'd reverse-engineered from Charlie Erm because it was good in December, and she had extra. She brought it in a container that was practical rather than beautiful. And when Ethan opened the door and she stepped inside, Noah was at the kitchen table with his bridge project spread across it and looked up with the directness that was so purely his father's. Hi, he said. Hi, Noah. He looked at the container. What's that? Soup. What kind? Thai coconut. You can try it if you want. If you don't like it, you don't have to eat it. He considered this with the seriousness of someone making a real decision. Okay. Ethan took the container, caught her eye over the top of Noah's head, said nothing. The look said, he's been like this all morning. She sat down at the table, across from Noah and the bridge. Tell me about the engineering, she said. He told her. For 12 minutes, with the focused intensity of someone who had done actual research and was now deploying it, he explained suspension bridges, the main cables, the suspender cables, the deck, the towers, the distribution of load. He used words she suspected he'd looked up because they were slightly more formal than his regular vocabulary, slotting in and out of the explanation like borrowed tools he was still learning to hold. She asked real questions, not the patronizing kind, the ones adults asked kids to be encouraging. Actual questions. Why did the tower placement matter? What happened to the load distribution if one cable failed? He answered them with the same intensity, and in 2 cases said, "I don't know, let me check," and looked it up on the tablet beside him with the complete lack of self-consciousness of someone who considered not knowing a temporary state rather than a failing. Ethan was at the counter, technically making lunch, actually listening. When Noah reached the end of what he knew and the conversation found its natural pause, he looked at her and said, "My dad said you know how to do first aid." "Some, not everything." "He said you helped someone at a restaurant." "I did." "Were you scared?" She thought about it honestly. A little, but there wasn't time to pay attention to the scared part. Noah seemed to process this. "Is that what you do? When you're scared?" "Sometimes. Sometimes you just do the thing because the thing needs doing." He turned his pencil over on the table. "I got scared when I got my zipper stuck," he said. He said it carefully, the way he said things that mattered. Not of the zipper, of everyone seeing. "I know. You didn't make it a thing." "It wasn't a thing," says. "It felt like a thing to me." "I know it did," she said. "That's why I didn't make it one." He looked at her for a long moment, the look she'd seen him give adults when he was deciding something. Then he said, "Do you want to see the east side, where I fixed the error?" "Yes," she said. "Show me." He showed her. She asked about the correction process, what he'd seen, how he'd identified it, what he'd done. He explained. She listened. Ethan brought lunch to the table and the 3 of them ate it amid the bridge components. Noah talking intermittently, Ava asking intermittently, and the kind of quiet filling in between that was not the absence of comfort, but the presence of it. Later, when Noah had taken his tablet to his room and Ava was helping Ethan with the dishes, a thing she'd started doing automatically, without asking, the natural domestic response of someone who couldn't sit still when there was a task. Ethan said quietly, "Thank you for that." "For what?" "The questions, the real ones." He handed her a bowl to dry. "He can tell when people are performing interest." "I wasn't performing?" "I know, that's what I'm thanking you for." She dried the bowl. "He's going to be interesting," she said. "When he grows up, he's going to be one of those people that other people find slightly intense and don't realize is the smartest person in the room." "I'm aware," Ethan said. "It keeps me up at night slightly." "Why?" "Because I know what it feels like to be that kid. And I know what it takes to figure out how to be in rooms where people don't know how to read you." "You figured it out?" "Imperfectly." He handed her another bowl. "He has an advantage I didn't." "What's that?" "He knows someone sees him." He paused. "Multiple someones now." She set the bowl on the shelf. She was aware of the words but let them settle without making them into something larger than they were. "He's going to be fine," she said. "Yeah," Ethan said. "I think so too." The grant came through on the 22nd of December. She got the email at 6:47 in the morning before her alarm, lying in bed with her phone in her hand because she'd been checking every morning since the application went in. She read it twice. Then she read it a 3rd time, slowly, making sure she was reading what she was actually reading. She sat up. The number was enough. Not exactly enough to do everything. The spring plumbing replacement would still require supplementing from other sources, but enough to stabilize the near-term situation, enough to make the math work if she moved a few things carefully. The error she'd corrected, the structural fix from Ethan's contact, had clearly mattered. The application had been flagged for the 2nd review cycle rather than rejected on first pass, and the 2nd cycle had found it complete. She sat in her apartment in the early morning dark and she let the relief in, all of it, the kind she usually managed into more contained pieces because the full version was too much to stand in alone. Then she called Ethan. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice slightly rough with the hour. "What time is it?" "Almost 7. The grant came through." A pause. Then clearly, "Ava." "I know. That's..." He stopped. Started again. That's the application you fixed with the budget section? Yes. You fixed it yourself. I just gave you the information. You gave me the right information at the right time. That's not nothing. How much? She told him the number. He was quiet while he thought about it. She could almost hear the logistics brain engaging, running the numbers against what she'd told him about the situation. That covers the roof and gets you into spring, he said. Yes, I still need to figure out the plumbing. But you have time now. I have time now. He exhaled. Not a sigh. Something more specific. The breath of someone who'd been holding something quietly and was now allowed to put it down. I'm glad, he said, and his voice had the quality it got sometimes, not often, not performed, when something had reached him all the way through. Me too. She looked at the window, the first gray light of December morning starting at the edge of the glass. I wanted you to be the first person I called. He was quiet for a moment. I'm glad I was, he said. She pulled her knees up on the bed. The radiator started up. The percussion, the reliable noise of the place that was hers. Ethan. Yeah? I know we've been not naming this thing. We have. I think it might be time to name it. Another pause, a longer one. What do you want to call it? She thought about it. All the evenings, all the calls, the pasta, oversalted, the hand on the console that wasn't quite touching, Noah and his bridge and the East Side correction, her mother's voice, the Grant email in the gray morning light. I want to call it what it is, she said, which is that I'm with you if that's what you want. The silence on the other end was very complete. Then Ethan said, That's what I want. She looked at the window. The light was coming. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. Neither of them said anything else for a moment. They didn't need to. The thing had been said, and it was true, and it was out in the air now where both of them could see it. Outside, Chicago was doing what Chicago did in December. Cold, gray, already building toward something. And Ava sat in her small apartment with the radiator going and the phone against her ear and felt, in the specific way she had not let herself feel something in a very long time, that the room had the right proportions, that she could breathe at the actual size she was. The word together didn't change anything overnight. That was the thing about naming something. People talked about it like the naming was the arrival, the destination, the moment the story resolved into something clean. But the actual experience of it was more like turning on a light in a room you'd already been living in. Everything was where you'd left it. The furniture hadn't moved. You could just see it better now. What changed was smaller and more specific than the word implied. It changed in the way Ava answered when Diane asked how things were going. Not the measured, provisional answer she'd been giving for 2 months, but a simpler one that didn't hedge. It changed in the way Ethan mentioned her to Priya without the careful neutrality he'd been applying, the way you stopped applying careful neutrality to things you'd stopped needing to protect. It changed in the way Noah, 2 days after the Sunday with the soup and the bridge, had left a drawing on the kitchen table, a suspension bridge, labeled in his precise handwriting, with a small figure on one side that said me and a small figure on the other that said Ava, and had not mentioned it, just left it there and gone to his room, which was the 8-year-old's way of saying a thing without having to say it. Ethan had photographed the drawing and sent it to her without comment. She'd looked at it for a long time. She'd sent back, He labeled me. Ethan. He labels things he considers permanent. She hadn't known what to do with that, so she'd put her phone down and let it sit and picked it up 20 minutes later and looked at it again. Christmas came, not between them. They weren't there yet in the way that required a plan for Christmas specifically, and neither of them pushed for it. But around them, the city doing its December thing, the program doing its end-of-year event with the kids, and the handmade decorations, and the particular emotional weight of a room full of children who were excited, and also, many of them, carrying things that children shouldn't have to carry, and who let both coexist the way only children could. Ava ran the event. She'd been running it for 2 years, which meant she knew where the extra tape was kept, and which kid needed to be kept away from the glitter station for everyone's sake. And she moved through it with the efficiency of someone who was fully in the thing they were doing, which was one of the qualities about her that Diane had noticed early and never stopped noticing. At 4:30, when most of the kids had been picked up and the room was in the pleasant wreckage of a successful event, Noah was the last one at the table, working on something with the focus he applied to everything. Ava sat down next to him. He was making a card, construction paper folded carefully, with the geometric precision of someone who had thought about the fold before executing it. He was drawing on the front with a red marker. "Who's that for?" she asked. "My grandma." He didn't look up. "She likes red. Does she like cards?" "She likes things I make." He said it matter-of-factly, without sentimentality, just as a fact about his grandmother that he'd observed and filed. "She keeps everything." Ava watched him draw. He was putting a house on the card, a simple one, but with details she recognized. A pitched roof, a front step, a tree to one side that had been considered before being added. "That's a nice house," she said. "It's her house." He pressed down harder on the tree. "She's had it since before my dad was born." "A house like that is a good thing to have." Noah glanced up. "Do you have one?" "An apartment. But my mom has a house, the one I grew up in." "Is it nice?" "It needs some work." She paused. "We're fixing it." He nodded, processing this with the seriousness he applied to information. Then he went back to the card. "Are you coming to Christmas?" he asked. The question landed with the directness that was purely his, not manipulative, not performing a hope, just asking a direct question because he wanted to know the answer. "I don't know yet," she said. "Your dad and I haven't figured that out." "You should come." He said it simply. "It's better when there are more people." She looked at the side of his face, bent over the card, the red marker moving in careful strokes. "I'll talk to your dad," she said. "Okay." He capped the marker and looked at the card with the critical eye of someone assessing finished work. "The tree is a little lopsided. It gives it character." He seemed to consider this. "That's what my dad says about the pasta." She laughed. "He's right about both." Noah looked at her then. Not the assessing look, not the watching and deciding look. Something simpler and more open. The look of a kid who was just looking. "I'm glad you fixed my zipper," he said. The room was very quiet. "Me too," she said. She did go to Christmas. Not because Noah had asked exactly, but because the question had settled something she'd been circling, which was whether she was willing to let this be the full thing it was becoming rather than the controlled, partial version that was safer. The dinner was at Dorothy Cole's house in Evanston, a large house in the way that houses in Evanston were large, with bones from the 1920s and the accumulated evidence of a life that had been lived fully inside it. Dorothy had decorated for Christmas with the precision of someone who took pleasure in it, every element considered, nothing arbitrary. Ava arrived with Ethan and Noah, having met them at Ethan's apartment, and she was aware as they pulled up that this was the kind of moment that felt consequential in a way that was hard to prepare for. She had the tom kha in a container on her lap, because she'd asked what she could bring, and Dorothy had said nothing, and she'd brought soup anyway, because she was constitutionally unable to arrive at someone's house with nothing. Dorothy opened the door. She was exactly what Ava had assembled from Ethan's descriptions. Small, precise, with eyes that did the same rapid full take that Ethan's did, though differently configured. She looked at Ava, and Ava let her look, the way she'd let Meridian look on the first night, which was to say she stood there at her actual size and let the assessment happen. "You brought something," Dorothy said. Not a question. "Tom Kha. I wasn't sure about allergies." "No allergies. Come in." She stepped back, and then, without elaboration, "You have your mother's kind of face." Ava blinked. "You don't know my mother." "I mean the kind of face that's been responsible for other people," Dorothy said. "I recognize it." She said it without sentimentality, as a straightforward piece of information. "Come in. Noah, your cousins are in the back." Noah was already past them both, the particular motion of a child released into a house where cousins existed. Dorothy took the soup container and walked toward the kitchen, and Ava followed, and Ethan, behind her, caught her hand briefly. Not interlaced, not held, just a quick touch that said, "I see you," and let go before they reached the kitchen doorway. The dinner was not easy in the way that first family dinners were never easy. Marcus was there, Ethan's brother from Atlanta, bigger than Ethan, louder, with the quality of someone who had decided early in life that warmth was the most effective social strategy and had been right about it. He shook Ava's hand with both of his and said, "Finally, he's been very mysterious about you." And Ethan said, "I haven't been mysterious." And Marcus said, "You didn't tell Mom her name for 3 weeks. What would you call it?" And Ethan said, "Measured." And Marcus said, "Same thing." Dorothy's sister was there, and her husband, and their adult daughter who worked in medicine, and asked Ava 3 sharp questions about the after-school program in a way that was clearly assessing whether the interest was genuine, and Ava answered them directly without performing enthusiasm, and the sister's daughter appeared to accept this. Noah moved through the dinner with the ease of a child in a familiar context, appearing at Ava's elbow twice to show her things. Once a drawing his cousin had done that he thought was technically inaccurate, once a book from Dorothy's shelf that he'd found because it had a bridge on the cover. Both times he appeared and departed with the naturalness of someone who had decided she was in the geography of his life and was treating her accordingly. Ava noticed this. She thought everyone else probably noticed it too. At some point during the meal, after the food had been distributed and the initial performance of social arrangement had settled into something more genuine, Dorothy said, from her end of the table, "Ava, Ethan tells me you're applying for a position in the city's youth development office." Ava glanced at Ethan, who looked back at her with the expression of a man who was waiting to see if he'd overstepped. She'd mentioned it to him 3 days ago. A coordinator position that had opened at the city level, working across the network of programs rather than inside one. A step up in both scope and pay that she'd been turning over since a colleague had sent her the listing. She hadn't applied yet. She was still deciding. "I'm thinking about it," she said carefully. "You should apply," Dorothy said. It wasn't advice exactly, more an assessment delivered as fact. "You have the case management background and the direct program experience. That combination is exactly what those positions are written for and never actually find." "How do you know what those positions are written for?" "I ran hospital administration for 25 years. The language is the same. They write for an ideal and hire for what walks in the door." She picked up her glass. "You're what the language is actually describing." Ava looked at her. Dorothy looked back with the equanimity of someone who had said what she'd said and was not invested in the reaction to it. "Thank you," Ava said. "It's not a compliment, it's an assessment." Dorothy set down her glass. Though, in this case, they coincide. Marcus, across the table, caught Ava's eye and made a micro-expression that said, "This is actually her being warm." She almost smiled. After dinner, while Dorothy and Marcus's wife handled the kitchen with the efficient division of 2 people who'd done this many times before, Ethan found her on the back porch. It was cold, genuinely cold, the kind of December cold that Chicago produced when it was done being subtle. And she had her coat on and her hands around a mug of coffee that Dorothy had produced without being asked. He came out and stood next to her, looking at the backyard, which was brown grass and bare trees, and the orange glow of the neighbor's porch light a house over. "You survived," he said. "Your brother is very enthusiastic. He makes up for the parts of me that aren't. Your mother assessed me in the first 30 seconds. She assesses everyone in the first 30 seconds. It's not personal." It felt personal. It was also complimentary in her vocabulary. Ava turned the mug in her hands. She said, "I have my mother's kind of face." She meant it genuinely. "I know. That's what surprised me." She looked at the bare yard. I don't know what I expected. Something harder." "She's not hard, she's just precise," Ava said. "Like you." "Like me," he agreed. "I see where you got it." "Is that good or bad?" She thought about it honestly. "It's real," she said. "That's what it is. The whole evening is—" She paused. "Nobody performed tonight, even the hard moments. Your brother giving you a hard time was real. Your aunt's daughter interrogating me was real. Your mom saying what she said at the table. She just said it because it was true, not to make me feel anything about it." She looked at him. "I'm not used to rooms like that." "What are you used to?" "Rooms where people manage what they say, where the subtext is doing most of the work." She was quiet for a second. "This room was mostly text." Ethan was looking at her with the expression she'd learned, the one that was warmth without performance, the one that didn't announce itself. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah." She meant it. "I'm okay." She looked back at the yard. "The position your mom mentioned. You don't have to apply because she said to." "I know. I was already thinking about it." She turned the mug again. "The timeline is tight. Applications close January 15th. That's 3 weeks." "I know how many weeks it is." But not sharp. Just the reflex of someone who tracked her own timelines. "The application is mostly ready. I've been working on it. She stopped. "What?" "I've been in the program for 2 years. It's hard work, and I'm good at it, and it's small, and specific the way I said I liked. The city position it's bigger, more variables, more people, less control over the day-to-day." "Is the day-to-day what you want to control forever?" She looked at him. "That's a real question." "Yes." "You're asking me if I'm playing it small." "I'm asking what you want." She was quiet for a long moment. In the backyard, a wind moved through the bare branches and made the kind of sound that bare branches made, dry and specific, the sound of things that had let go of what they were holding. "I want to matter at scale," she said. "I've always wanted that. I went into social work because of it. The after-school program was the right place to land when I needed to land, but it's not. It was never supposed to be the ceiling." She looked at the yard. "I think I've been treating it like a ceiling because it felt safer than aiming at the actual thing." "Apply," he said. "That's not the complicated part." "What's the complicated part?" She turned to look at him. "The complicated part is that if I get it, things change. My schedule changes. My availability changes. I'm managing a network instead of a room of kids, which means I'm in the building, but not—" She stopped. "Noah's in that room." He was still. "I'm not saying that's the deciding factor," she said. "I'm saying I noticed it. And I'm telling you because we said we'd route things through each other." He looked at her for a long moment. The porch light made his face half shadow, and the cold was real, and she was aware of the distance between them being very small. "Apply," he said again. "What happens with Noah is a separate question, and it's not yours to solve by staying smaller." "Ethan, I mean it. You matter to him because of who you are, not which room you're in when you're mattering." His voice was even. "And you matter to me the same way. What you do for work it's not the thing. It was never the thing." She looked at him. "Apply," he said, a third time quietly. She turned back to the yard. "Okay," she said. "Okay. I'll finish the application this week." He nodded. They stood in the cold for another minute, not because there was more to say, but because the cold and the bare yard and the orange neighbor light were exactly the right amount of reality for the moment, and neither of them was in a hurry to go back inside. She leaned slightly against him. Not dramatically, just the natural lean of someone finding a place to rest. He didn't move. He just let her. She submitted the application on January 12th, 3 days before the deadline, after 4 revisions that each made it more accurate and less performed. She used the budget justification framework she'd learned from the grant process. She wrote the personal statement twice. The first version was what she thought they wanted to hear, and she threw it out. The second version was what she actually thought, which was more uncomfortable to write and significantly more true. She sent it without reading it a 5th time, because the 5th reading would have been the one where she started softening things back down. She told Ethan she'd sent it. He sent back, "Good." She told Diane, who said something that involved several exclamation points and the word finally in capital letters. She told her mother on a Sunday phone call, and Rosa was quiet for a moment and then said, "I always knew you were too big for that room." Ava said, "It's a good room." And Rosa said, "It is, and you're bigger." She didn't tell anyone about the specific terror of the 3 weeks that followed, during which she checked her email with the same compulsive attention she'd given to the grant notification and found nothing, and kept doing the work she was doing with the complete focus it required, and found that the work itself was the best antidote to the waiting, which was something she'd always known, but kept having to relearn. The call came on a Thursday morning in the first week of February. She was on the bus, which was where she was on Thursday mornings, and the Chicago number that came up was one she didn't recognize, which meant it was either a solicitation or something real, and she answered because she couldn't afford to miss something real. Ms. Miller? This is Carol Huang from the Mayor's Office of Youth Development. I'm calling about your application for the network coordinator position. Ava put her hand on the pole and held on. She got the job. She got the job, and she sat on the bus 3 stops past her stop because she didn't register that she'd missed it. And then she got off and stood on a February sidewalk in Chicago with her breath making small clouds in the air and her phone in her hand. And she felt something move through her that she didn't immediately have a name for. It wasn't just relief. It was bigger than relief and heavier than joy. And it had something in it that was almost grief. Not the bad kind, the other kind. The kind that came when something you'd been carrying a long time got to be put down, and you didn't realize until the moment of setting it down how much weight it had actually been. She stood on the sidewalk and let it happen. Then she called Ethan. He picked up immediately. She heard the sound of his office in the background, keyboard, the faint sound of something on a screen, and then the sound of those things being set aside. "Tell me," he said. "I got it." The silence on his end was exactly 1 beat. Then, "Ava." "Yeah." "Tell me the number." She told him the salary. He was quiet while he ran it, which she could feel even through the phone. "That's meaningful," he said, and his voice had what it had that morning in December when the grant notification had come through, the sound of something releasing. "It's more than meaningful," she said. "It covers the spring plumbing. It covers everything if I'm careful, which," she laughed slightly, "which I always am." "You are," he said. "You really are." A pause. "Are you still on the bus?" "I missed my stop." "Where are you?" She looked at the street sign. "About 4 blocks north of where I should be." "Walk the 4 blocks," he said. "Take your time." "I have to be at work by—" "Oh, you have 4 minutes. Walk the 4 blocks." She started walking. The February cold was the committed kind, not the pretending kind from October, but the real Chicago February that had decided on its position and intended to hold it. Her breath kept making clouds. "I keep thinking about what I told you," she said, "about wanting to matter at scale." "I remember. I've been wanting it since I was 22, and I kept redirecting it because the scale felt irresponsible, like wanting too much." She passed a closed coffee shop, a laundromat starting its morning cycle, a man walking a dog that had opinions about the cold. "I know that's not a logical thing. I know there's no such thing as wanting too much in that direction. But when you grow up watching what happens when you want things you can't have, you stop letting yourself want the big ones," he said. "You curate the wanting down to something you can guarantee, something you can figure out." She paused at a crosswalk. "I've been figuring things out since I was 9. "I know. I think—" She stopped, started again. "I think I've been so good at making things work that I mistook making things work for the thing itself, like the functionality was the goal." She crossed the street. It was never the goal. It was just the floor. He was quiet on the other end listening. "The goal," she said, "was this. Whatever this is. Bigger room, more people to help, enough breathing room to be present." She looked at the street ahead. "That's what I've been after." "You're there," he said. "I'm at the start of it." "Yes, but you're there." She thought about 9 years old and an EBT card and a system that didn't explain itself, and a girl who had decided that not knowing was a temporary state and had spent the next 2 decades moving through temporary states with the specific competence of someone who had never been allowed to be permanent in anything. She was 30 years old. She had a job that was the size of the thing she'd actually wanted. She had her mother's house with a new roof and plumbing that was going to be fixed in the spring. She had a sister in an honors nursing program who was going to be extraordinary. She had a man who had said, "I came here to meet you on a rainy Friday night in October," and had meant it, and had kept meaning it, and had not once made her feel like a variable to be managed. She had a kid who labeled things he considered permanent. "Ethan," she said. "Yeah." "Thank you. For the night of the dinner at Meridian." A pause. "For the restaurant that was too much?" "For staying in the seat when I walked in. She reached the corner she was supposed to be at. A different person might have seen what the room saw. You saw something else. I saw you, he said. That's all. That was enough, she said. That was the whole thing. About the thing Ryan Marsh had said, interesting taste, made its way back to Ethan in February. Not through Priya this time, but directly. At a board dinner that Ethan had attended out of strategic obligation, and that Ryan had apparently attended with the intention of having a conversation he'd been deferring since November. He found Ethan near the bar between the dinner and whatever formality came after, and he said it with the specific tone of a man who believed he was being helpful. I've been meaning to say, I saw you at Meridian a few months back. With someone. I didn't want to interrupt. A pause. Waited. I hope things are going well. Ethan looked at him. He'd had 4 months to think about this conversation. He'd run it several times the way he ran things. Different angles, different responses, assessing outcomes. What he said was, they are. Ryan smiled with the smile of a man waiting for more. Ethan gave him nothing more. He picked up his drink and said, how's the Q1 integration looking from your end? And redirected the conversation to the thing they were both technically there to discuss. And Ryan, after a beat of recalibration, followed, because there was nothing else available to him. That was the conversation. That was all of it. Ethan drove home afterward and thought about how much energy he'd spent anticipating it, and how little energy it had actually required. He texted Ava. Had the Ryan Marsh conversation. Her reply came back. How did it go? I changed the subject. That's it? That's it. A pause. Then, I expected something more dramatic. I know. It turns out most things aren't. Was that hard? He thought about it. No, he wrote, not as hard as I thought. She sent back. Good. Then, Noah wants to know if you're making pasta this week or if he has to eat something with actual flavor. Ethan stared at his phone. He said that? I'm paraphrasing generously. I'll make something else. He's going to want to know what. Tell him it's a surprise. He doesn't like surprises. He gets that from me. I know, she wrote. That's why I'm telling you now, so you have time to prepare an answer. He sat in the parking structure of the building where the dinner had been held, in his car in February, and he laughed. The real kind. Short, surprised, arrived before he knew it was coming. He drove home. The city coordinator position started March 1st. Ava spent February in transition, wrapping her time at the program, training the person taking over her caseload, saying goodbye to the kids in the way that the program allowed, which was not a formal goodbye because she'd still be working within the network, just differently. On her last day as a direct staff member, she stayed late to organize the supply closet one final time. She'd been the person who kept it organized for 2 years, and she was leaving it better than she'd found it, which was the standard she applied to every situation she departed. Diane found her there at 5:30, sitting on the floor with her back against the shelf, surrounded by organized construction paper and labeled marker bins. Supply closet as emotional processing space, Diane said. Classic. I'm done. I'm just sitting. Diane sat down on the floor next to her. They were both quiet for a minute. You're going to be great at the new thing, Diane said. I know. That's not arrogant. I know that too. Ava leaned her head back against the shelf. I'm going to miss the kids. You're going to be working with every program in the network. You'll see kids everywhere. Different kids, different context. Still kids. Yeah. She looked at the labeled bins. You know what I realized? What? When I came to this program, I thought I was stepping back from the scale of the case management work, from the ambition of it. I thought I was choosing something smaller to protect myself. She paused. I wasn't stepping back. I was regrouping. There's a difference, and I didn't know it at the time. Diane looked at her sideways. Did Ethan say that? No, I figured it out myself. Okay, but did he say something that led to you figuring it out? Ava considered the distinction. He asked me if I wanted to control the day-to-day forever, and I went home and thought about it, and that's when I figured it out. So he asked the question. I answered it. That's actually a good division of labor, Diane said. Ava looked at her. I like him, Diane said, based on everything I know, which is entirely secondhand and therefore completely reliable. Ava smiled. He wants to meet you. I know. I want him to know that I've been a character in this story for months, and I deserve proper acknowledgement. I'll tell him. Please do. Diane got up, brushing off her pants. Come on. I'll buy you coffee from the terrible machine. Ava stood. She took one last look at the supply closet, the organized shelves, the labeled bins, the construction paper sorted by color in a way that no one had requested and that she'd done anyway because it was neater. And she turned off the light. Phil Reyes' crew started on Rosa's plumbing in April. Ava was there for the first day because she'd taken a personal day and because she wanted to be present when it happened, the way she wanted to be present for things she'd worked toward. Rosa made coffee for the crew, which they accepted with the appreciation of people who understood that coffee from the homeowner was a different category of hospitality than coffee from a machine. The work took 4 days. It was loud and disruptive, and Rosa managed it with the stoic acceptance of a woman who had been managing disruption for 30 years. And by Thursday afternoon, the plumbing was done, and the house was functional in a way it hadn't been since the intermittent problem had started 2 years ago. Rosa turned on the kitchen faucet and watched the water run clean and consistent, and she stood there for a long moment watching it. Ava watched her mother watch the water. Good, Rosa said finally. Yeah, Ava said. Good. In May, Ethan met Rosa. Not at a dinner designed for the meeting. That would have been the wrong architecture. It happened at Rosa's house on a Saturday afternoon because Ava had asked if they could stop by before dinner to drop something off, which was true, and because Ethan had said yes, which was also true, and because both of them understood that stop by to drop something off was the comfortable language for the actual thing, which was that it was time. Rosa answered the door and looked at Ethan the way she looked at everything, direct, full, making her assessment before anyone had spoken. Ethan looked back. Come in, Rosa said. He came in. He brought nothing because Ava had told him not to bring anything, and he had, for once, listened exactly. He sat at Rosa's kitchen table, the same table where Ava had looked at the estimate in November and run the math 3 ways. And Rosa made coffee and they talked. Rosa asked him questions that were honest and without decoration. What did he actually do now? Not the title, the actual thing. What did he think about the city's education funding situation, which was a topic she had opinions about? What had Noah been like as a small child? And he answered all of them directly and without performance, and Rosa received the answers with the same directness. At some point, Rosa asked, "What do you want for Ava?" Ava, sitting across the table, went still. Ethan looked at Rosa steadily. I want her to have everything she's been building toward, he said. I want to be in it, but not in the way that requires her to be smaller. He paused. I want her to have the full thing. Whatever the full thing is. Rosa was quiet for a moment. She looked at him. She looked at Ava. She looked back at her coffee. Okay, she said. That was all. Just okay. But the way she said it was the way she'd said it to Ava in November when Ava had told her what Phil had found wrong with the house. With the finality of someone who had assessed the situation, found it something she could work with, and was now prepared to move forward. Rosa did not elaborate. She didn't need to. Yet, summer arrived the way Chicago summers did, aggressively and without apology, the city flipping from cold to hot with the minimal transition period it always granted. The lakefront filled up. The neighborhoods turned their front stoops into living rooms. The after-school programs shifted into summer programming, and Ava's new role meant she was coordinating 8 of the 12 sites simultaneously, which was exactly as complicated as she'd anticipated, and also exactly as interesting. She was good at it. She'd known she would be, which was not arrogance but accurate self-assessment, something she'd spent a long time learning the difference between. On a Saturday in June, she was at Ethan's kitchen island. It had become, by gradual and unannounced migration, something like a second workspace for her on Saturday mornings, the way places become usual, with her laptop open and a second coffee in front of her, reviewing the summer site reports that all had different systems and formats because no one had standardized them before she got there, and she was in the process of fixing that. Noah came downstairs in the particular morning configuration of a 9-year-old. Pajamas, hair at a structural angle that suggested the pillow had had strong opinions about it, expression indicating that he was awake but had not yet endorsed it. He looked at Ava. He looked at the coffee. He looked at the laptop. "You're working," he said. "A little. It's Saturday." "I know." He went to the cabinet and got a glass and poured water from the filter pitcher with the care of someone doing a precision task, and then he came and sat on the stool next to her. She looked sideways at him. "Can I see?" he asked, indicating the laptop. "It's spreadsheets." "I like spreadsheets." She turned the laptop slightly. He looked at the screen with the focused attention he gave everything. The bridge, the card for his grandmother, the documentary about structural engineering he'd apparently watched twice. "Your formula ranges aren't locked," he said. "I know. I'm still building it." "You should lock them as you go. My dad says it's easier than fixing them after." "Your dad is right." "He usually is." He said it matter-of-factly, the way he said things about his father. Not performing admiration, just stating observed reality. "About spreadsheets specifically." She smiled. "I'll lock them as I go." "Good." He drank his water. "Is he up?" "I don't think so. He sleeps later on Saturdays now." "Is that unusual?" Noah considered. "He used to wake up early even on Saturdays. He said his brain didn't know how to stay off." He turned his water glass on the counter, a gesture she recognized from his father. "He sleeps later now." She looked at the boy next to her. 9 years old, pajamas, structural hair, the composed manner of someone who had been paying attention since before he had language for what he was paying attention to. "That's good," she said. "Yeah," he said. "It is." He finished his water and set the glass down and got up to go back upstairs, and then he stopped at the kitchen doorway and said, without turning around, "Ava." "Yeah?" "You're going to come to my school thing in July, right? The STEM fair." "If your dad says it's—" "I'm asking you." He turned then, looking at her directly. "Not as someone from the program. As you." She looked at him. "Yes," she said. "I'll be there." He nodded once, the satisfied nod of someone who had asked a real question and received a real answer, and went upstairs. She turned back to the laptop. She locked the formula ranges. The STEM fair was a Friday afternoon in July, in the school gymnasium, which had the particular smell of gymnasiums and the specific noise level of 300 people in a space designed for 6 teams and a referee. Noah's project was a scale model of a suspension bridge with a written analysis of load distribution that the judges, 2 engineers from a downtown firm who volunteered their time, had apparently spent more time on than any other project in his age group. He didn't win first place. He won second, which he received with the focused acceptance of someone who had already identified the specific technical elements in the first place project that had edged him out. Her tensioning system was more accurate, he told Ethan and Ava afterward, standing outside the gymnasium in the July heat with his second-place ribbon. "I knew mine was an approximation, I just didn't have the right components." "What components?" Ava asked. He explained. She asked questions. He answered them with the focused precision that she'd stopped finding surprising and had started finding simply true to who he was. Ethan stood next to her and listened to his son explain tensioning systems in July, and he was aware of a specific quality in the moment, not the performed appreciation of someone trying to mark it as significant, but the quiet awareness of someone who understood, without needing to editorialize, that this was a good thing. This specific arrangement, the gymnasium behind them, the July heat, the second-place ribbon, his son explaining a structural principle he'd researched because he wanted to understand it, and Ava next to him asking real questions because she actually wanted the answers. He thought about the corner table at Meridian 8 months ago and the 40 minutes he'd spent alone there before the door opened. He thought about what it felt like to be in a room and be entirely elsewhere simultaneously. He thought about the word his former partner had used, building, and how she'd meant it as a wound and how it had been accurate in a way he hadn't known how to address at the time. He was in this. Fully. He didn't know when exactly it had shifted. It was the kind of thing that happened while you were paying attention to everything else, and then you looked, and it was already true. Noah finished his explanation and looked at both of them expectantly. The component issue is solvable, Ava said. There's a set. I know which set, Noah said immediately. I've been thinking about the next build. Of course you have, Ethan said. Can we go get food? Noah asked. I've been in that gym for 4 hours and it smells like gym. It does smell like gym, Ava agreed. Chalerm? Ethan asked. Noah looked at Ava. She looked at Noah. They appeared to conduct a brief, wordless assessment. Chalerm, Noah said. They walked to the car through the July afternoon, Noah slightly ahead in the way he walked when he was thinking about something. Not inattentive to what was around him, just also somewhere in his head where suspension bridge problems lived. Ethan and Ava walked behind him, and Ethan's hand found hers, properly this time. Not the console, not quite touching of October, but actually, fingers interlaced, the ordinary everyday gesture of two people who had decided to be in each other's lives. She looked at him sideways. He looked back. Nothing was said, because nothing needed to be. Some things communicated themselves in the moment of their occurring, and the language came later or didn't come at all, and either way the thing itself was already real. Noah stopped at the car and turned around. He looked at them. The joined hands, the proximity, the two adults who were, in the vocabulary of an almost 9-year-old building a model of the world, clearly something to each other. Finally, he said. Ethan stared at him. He's been like this for a month, Ava said to Ethan. You knew? I figured it out, she said. I'm good at that. Noah pulled open the car door with the satisfied air of someone whose model of the world had just been confirmed accurate. They got in the car. They drove to Chalerm in the July heat with the windows down and the city going past, and Chai waiting at the door because he always seemed to know, and Noah explained tensioning systems to anyone who would listen, and Ava listened, and Ethan listened, and the evening came in through the open windows, and it was warm and real and imperfect in the specific ways that things were imperfect when they were actual rather than imagined. No one that night said anything about how far they'd come. People who had worked for things rarely did. They just ate their food and talked about bridges and let the good thing be the good thing without making it into a speech about itself. The night ended the way good nights ended. Not dramatically, not with a conclusion that felt like a conclusion, but with the gradual, ordinary winding down of people who were tired in the good way from a day that had been full. And whatever came next, the hard things that would still come, because hard things always did, because no life that was actually being lived got to skip that part. They would figure it out. They were all, in their different ways, very good at figuring things out. That was enough. That had always been enough.